Hello, welcome to the second day of the Creative Exchange 2021. We are in Ljubljana in Museum of Architecture and Design. My name is Mateusz Celik and I am the founder and the program director of the Future Architecture platform. Let's go to day number 2. Today we will talk about tools of care. We will discuss about what do we need to update and upgrade our design tools? What kind of cultural and professional weapons do we need to address the current challenges? We will talk about developing new alliances and new networks, about connecting professions, about mutual cross-cultural critical thinking, and joint international practices. But first of all, let us meet our new member. In 2015, when the platform started, we had 14 members. And then after that, the platform grew, and today we have 28 member organizations. The last organization who joined us last year in 2021 is Dani Arhitekture from Sarajevo. And here I welcome Irhana Šehović, who will present us what they do in the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
I would just like to say it's going to be Dunja Krvavac with me also, if we can just unmute her.
Hi.
So I'll just start. I am Irhana and this is Dunja. Dunja will be sharing our presentation. We are project managers from Days of Architecture Sarajevo, and we will tell you something more in the next 15 minutes we have. We will have a short presentation and a video at the end. So we are from an organization called LIFT Spatial Initiatives, and we have these 3 main activities under our umbrella. First activity is Days of Architecture as our yearly festival that usually happens in June. This year, maybe with all Corona situation, we will be moving it to September with a special concept. Another thing we have is the Nights of Architecture. They happen more often throughout the year, and they're more relaxed and less curated and less defined events scattered throughout the year. Another thing we started recently, 2 years ago, is our Fresh and Bold Award, which we have awarded twice until now, and we are in the process of voting for the 3rd winner of our Fresh and Bold Award. If we go further, I'm gonna say a few main numbers about us. We are in Sarajevo. We have been around for 14 years and have hosted people from 20 different countries with around 200 different lectures. And we are 6 young leaders and overall 8 members inside our organization with around 50 volunteers throughout the year. What is important is the concept of the festival that we're going to be talking more about, but we like to experiment in architecture throughout the different tools, and tools that we've had until now are different competitions, workshops, panels, video mappings, and exhibitions. And there's numbers of panels we've had and workshops. The city we come from is Sarajevo. This is Sarajevo. Very common photo of Sarajevo in the winter. We might have a slight pollution problem, but a physical space that actually connects us all is this Sarajevo. It is in a way our playground in which we work and which most of our projects actually happen in. But Sarajevo, with its distinct history, actually gives us a very interesting platform to play on, and we always come back to it. Which gives us a also a distinct feeling in the festival, and probably wouldn't be the same if Sarajevo wasn't our city. Dunja will say more, will tell us more about the team.
Yeah, hi, my name is Dunja, and here you can see the structure of our organization, the core members. So the founders of the festival, of the entire organizations, Nedim and Yasmin, they are currently one of the 2 top young architects in our country. And there's 4 of us who are coordinating the entire festival and the entire project. We are also kind of just out of school young people who have seen something interesting in this organization. And we have also 2 additional members who are also coordinators, but are specialized in PR and volunteers, since volunteers play a really, really important role in our organization. So the entire festival and the entire organization has started in 2008 with Yasmin's and Edith's initiative as students to try to improve the quality of lectures in our school that we all finished the same school. So it started out as a student festival, and it acted as such for 2 or 3 years. When it just blew up into being really one of the most important festivals and events in the entire country and even the region. So up to 2016, 2015, they were experimenting with different topics regarding public space and activism, and trying to focus attention on public buildings of culture, such are theaters, galleries, museums that in our country tend to be moved out of the budget or don't get any financing at all. And sometimes around 2015, 2016, most of us, the young ones, have joined the team. And at that time, the big transformation of our festival began into being a very, very complexly structured festival with curators. So in 2017, we have our first curator, which resulted in having much more complex topics, much more people coming from the outside. Like we went from being a local and regional festival into inviting people from Chile and Japan, and like people were coming to Sarajevo and having this amazing story told in our city. So up to 2020, we had like live festival once a year, and into 2020, because of the pandemics, we went online, which I have to say, from my personal experience, we were kind of scared, but it resulted in really, really good things. So this is like a zoom in, just so you can see how it's structured with the topics and what we actually do. So Hannah mentioned competitions. We had 2 or 3 competitions, numerous exhibitions. And I have to add, just because I forgot, in our core team, there's a flying member, which I have to mention. He's our curator for 2020, and we hope that he will continue working with us in 2021. He's Francesco Del Innocenti, so I say hi to him now. And Hannah will now just shortly explain what is our plan for 2021.
So in 2021, due to pandemics and the situation that got us all wondering how to proceed, and due to the fact that throughout the years, Days of Architecture has had different places in Sarajevo that we, in a way, revived with the festival and the workshops, and we always worked with the public space inside Sarajevo. Due to pandemics and all the regulations, it's become much harder, much more difficult to work in that space. So we will try this year to use the idea that Sarajevo is actually in a valley and surrounded by mountains, which brought us the Olympic Games some time ago. But we're going to try to move our festival to the mountain this year. And in September, we're going to have hopefully a hybrid event in the open on the mountain, and talking about the mountainscape and understanding the local architecture in this global context that we're all in. But the first event that is coming on right now in March is our exhibition In Between, dealing with the discussion we all have been in probably last year about private and public spaces losing the distinct margin and being one space nowadays. So it's going to be a specific kind of experiment exhibition placed in Dunja's apartment, actually. And in July, we're gonna be part of the Italian pavilion for a day in July 23rd and talk about resilience and resilience irony of Sarajevo. And in October is our Future Architecture and Days of Architecture event. And we also hope that that event might present a first post-corona party, but let's see about that. But talking about parties also, it's something that we encourage inside our festival, and we like to start our festivals with a big party and end them with a big one. So we're gonna be showing you after movie of our 2017 festival, and that's our presentation for today.
Yeah, so just bear with us for a few more moments.
I feel much more at home here in the sense that I feel that there's a far more curious audience, maybe because you haven't gone to sleep yet. You're still awake. Is a dinosaur, a cynical dinosaur. That breed of architects should be exterminated. And the gold dust.
So yeah, that was
Thank
it.
you very much for listening.
Tako. Thank you, Irhana and Dunja. In order to get prepared for Amica, we will take a 15-minute break now. And you can either watch video presentations of this year's ideas, or you can listen to the music from Nicola. We will continue this, the session at 1:30.
Somos o Santos Collective, uma entidade coletiva sem fins lucrativos, formada por comerciantes do bairro de Santos Velho, em Lisboa, com o objetivo de ajudar a nossa comunidade com iniciativas sociais. A nossa ideia surgiu como reação aos problemas em que vivemos em comunidade.
Moje ime je Nina, dobrodošli u moj dom. Ovo je moja obitelj, 2 mačke, 18 biljki, 300 knjiga i ostali predmeti. Dio sam ženskog dizajnerskog kolektiva Oaza iz Zagreba. Svojom praksom borimo se protiv ustaljenih normi promišljanja, surađujući horizontalno, saznati i željom. U nastavku slijedi fragmentalna prezentacija ideje, narativi prostora u filmu.
Ну, а санаториум премиум — это сообщество людей, которым не безразличны санатории, интересно тратить свои выходные на то, чтобы посещать их, изучать их, обсуждать их, проводить время в этом контексте. Это Инстаграм, где появляется самый разный, но всегда посвященный санаториям контент. Вот, и это попытка наладить вот эту связь нас и санаториев.
We are an office. 我们是不定型小组。
我是方肖阳。
丁思琪。
庄元培。
我们来自中国，成立于美国纽约。
我们关注空间体系中的不确定性、
矛盾性、
双关性，在项目看不见的景观中，
我们希望展现温室城市化与光合殖民的不同维度与侧面，
重审生态种植业中多面的自然与人性。
Materia Prima es un proyecto crítico de investigación que nace a partir de la asociación de la extracción intensiva de materiales del subsuelo y la transformación de esta materia en aquello que llamamos arquitectura.
Registra la pérdida y transformación del territorio, esta constante uso y desuso de los materiales, además de visibilizar el impacto de la industria extractivista y las radicales transformaciones causadas por sus gigantescos procedimientos mecánicos.
A la Sovet nació a distancia y tiene carácter ubicuo y digital. Aunque los 4 somos de Las Palmas, la movilidad ha sido una constante estos últimos años. En ninguno de nuestros proyectos hemos conseguido trabajar todos en el mismo lugar y al mismo tiempo. Este proyecto nace del deseo de juntarnos y celebrar, porque ni los directos de Instagram son iguales que un concierto, ni las reuniones por Zoom pueden sustituir el acto de juntarse y salir a la calle.
Hi, I'm Gili Korzewski.
And I'm Rosario Talevi.
We are 2 of 6 founding members of the Soft Agency Collective.
Surrounding us today, you see the site of the Floating University, a nature culture learning site in Berlin.
We're going to tell you a little bit more about Climate Care, which is a festival we initiated here in 2019.
Jmenuji se Magdalena Havlová, jsem architektka žijící a působící v Praze, kde se kromě své vlastní praxe věnuji doktorantskému studiu na Akademii výtvarných umění. Ve své práci se zabývám typologií architektury obecně prospěšného bydlení, její historií a jejím budoucím vývojem. Pro platformu Future Architecture bych chtěla realizovat projekt, který blíže reflektuje úlohu poloveřejných prostor právě těchto obecních a družstevních domů.
Parallelt med andre ting jeg driver med, og det heter The Architecture of Chronic Illness.
Colectivo Puncis somos una cooperativa de urbanistas, sociólogas y arquitectas que trabajamos desde el 2005 repensando los espacios desde una perspectiva feminista e interseccional, que tiene en cuenta la diversidad de necesidades de todas las personas. Durante estos años hemos trabajado en más de 150 pueblos y ciudades del mundo, incorporando la voz de las personas a través de la participación y la acción comunitaria. Nuestro objetivo es transformar los espacios poniendo la sostenibilidad y los cuidados en el centro de las decisiones urbanas.
Hola, benvinguts a l'Oasi. L'Àlvaro, l'Eduarda, Sergio i jo vam formar equip al màster habilitant de l'Escola d'Arquitectura del Vallès per desenvolupar el projecte de reordenació de les illes del riu Llobregat al seu pas per aquest municipi, per Sallent. Les inquietuds dels quatre ens van portar a voler donar resposta a l'encàrrec amb la restauració paisatgística d'aquest espai on em trobo ara, una àrea fortament transformada per un passat industrial que segueix encara aquí latent.
Jag heter Erika Henriksson och är en arkitekt från Norrbotten i Sverige som för tillfället bor i Norge. Just nu sitter jag och skriver på min praktikbaserade PhD som beskriver hur praktiken Architherapy bildades genom ett undersökande byggprojekt som inleddes som ett samarbete mellan mig och 2 personer boende på en rehabiliteringsklinik. Och i nästa del kommer jag att presentera Architherapy tillsammans med videomaterial från projektet som praktiken tagit form genom.
Hi, we're Sonic Acts of Noticing. Our team is comprised of 2 architectural designers and educators, a sound artist and 2 web design researchers.
We come together with our overlapping interests to explore the potential of foregrounding the sonic in the creation of emancipatory spaces.
Our project deploys listening as a critical spatial practice. It has been developed in response to the question, how can we find and amplify acts of care on the high street?
Здравейте! Казвам се Моника Маринова, занимавам се с архитектура, дипломирах се в Манчестър и Лондон Метрополитън Юниверсити. В момента работя и живея в Бургас. Проектът, който ще видите представен в следващото видео, изследва социалния аспект на архитектурата и е награден с Young Talent Architecture Award на Европейския съюз. По-подробно, проектът изследва възможността на архитектурата да ни обединява като общество и чрез дизайна на околната среда да възпитава в нас добра етика, социална загриженост и обществена сплотеност.
Bonjour, nous sommes David Dautelonde et Vendry Marchais, architectes et cofondateurs de l'atelier Senzu, agence d'architecture basée à Paris. Nous explorons les nouvelles manières de penser et de faire le projet dans un contexte contemporain en profonde mutation, pour préfigurer un futur qui soit plus désirable à travers un enjeu principal, celui de l'éducation.
En réponse au sujet Landscape of Care, nous avons souhaité présenter les multiples relations qui existent entre architecture et pédagogie et comment elles s'influencent l'une et l'autre.
Hallo, mijn naam is Willem. Ik ben sinds 2 jaar afgestudeerd als architect en ik woon en werk hier in Brussel. In 2018 ben ik met een aantal collega-studenten naar Ayacucho in Peru getrokken om onderzoek te doen naar de manier waarop de stad Ayacucho minder waterafhankelijk kan worden en hoe circulaire waterinfrastructuur eigenlijk deel kan worden van het stedelijk weefsel en van het publieke landschap. En op die manier een gedeelde cultuur rond water kan doen ontstaan.
Hi, we are Puzzle, a collective of young and enthusiastic architects from North Macedonia, launched in 2018. This is the team: Adelina Fazer, Sanja Avramoska, Irena Damianoska, Brankica Dogazenska, and Valbona Fazer. We are sharing with you Back to Nature.
My name is Franny, and my mom and I co-wrote a manual for mothers with acquired disabilities. The manual is designed specifically for the folder that patients receive upon discharge from a rehabilitation center, offering first-person, home-based tactical design strategies for hemiplegics like my mom, who might receive training on independent living, but who actually find themselves responsible for many types of care. The manual is divided into 4 parts: the floor, the drawers, what we're calling the background, and the street. The following video starts with the floor, providing diagrams and a glimpse at how we narrate the manual, hyphening the perspective of a mother and her daughter.
We are Alberta Lauritsen, Alice Majer, Sejal Tank, Sophie Williams, Hanna Rosenberg, and Marianna Janovic, and we are EDIT, Feminist Design Collective. We focus on the enduring biases and hierarchies embedded into the environments surrounding us. Our approach uses design as a tool to support more equal interactions, both during the design process and as the outcome of the finished project.
Biz FemArk kolektifi, kesişimsel projeler üzerinde çalışan bir grup kadın mimarız.
On vit toutes à Berlin, mais on vient de contextes divers et nos centres d'intérêt sont différents.
Der F-Walk ist ein laufender Prozess, für den wir die Vielfalt subjektiver Raumerfahrungen und unterschiedlicher Zugangsmöglichkeiten zu Raum dokumentieren und diese auf eine körperbetonte Art vermitteln.
My name is Jogi Rikus, Portuguese architect living in Bristol. Here, a statue of a slave trader was thrown into the harbor. This is one of our digital archive stories.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm an artist and I'm the mother of an Afro-European girl.
My name is Mari. I'm an African-European designer. I have family all across Europe.
Hola, soy Jorgelina Sabert.
Yo soy Juan González del Cerro, ambos argentinos, y estamos detrás del proyecto Minorities in Metropolis. Jorgelina es diseñadora, yo director de arte, y ambos compartimos interés por la fotografía. Nos conocimos en Barcelona, casualmente en el barrio del Raval.
Comenzamos registrando las peluquerías que nos cautivaron por la estética que las caracteriza y acabamos descubriendo una gran comunidad con fuertes lazos solidarios y gran apoyo entre sí.
Hola a todos, soy Carlos Ranusa, ganador de la Writing Grand Final de esta edición de Future Architecture con la propuesta Borders of Cares. La idea nace de una obsesión sobre las continuas agresiones de fronteras que cometemos cada día en la búsqueda de nuevas maneras de sentir o vivir, y cómo la arquitectura puede ser un medio para satisfacer o impedir estos movimientos. Es un tema que pone en valor otra manera de ver la arquitectura y trasladable a múltiples formatos.
Hello, nice to meet you online. My name is Yue. Together with this team of artists and designers in the Netherlands, Russia and UK, from 2019, we have been exploring the ways in which art and artistic research could inform urban development through looking at landscapes.
Hola, I'm Gabriele, a Peruvian architect and design researcher. The plural landscapes of food systems, their politics and ecologies are the framework of my design practice.
Ahlan, I'm Majer, a Swiss Egyptian design researcher, currently focusing on food and cooking as a medium to create spaces of exchange and communal reflection. Cocinas Alterinos, or Alton kitchens, only scratches the surface of the endless possibilities of kitchens as spaces of care, resilience, and resistance. Care to join us?
Hello, I'm Alexander Auris. I'm a Peruvian architect living and working in Brussels for 2 years. The idea that I present this year for Future Architecture platform is called Queer Commons, and it's a research.
Hello, welcome at the Future Architecture Creative Exchange 2021. And I welcome again the special guest of this year's Creative Exchange, Amica Dall. Amica is a writer, designer, and strategist. She focuses on the intersection between the built structures and the social life in the cities, and at the same time on the communication of design-related issues to the wider audiences. Amica is trained in anthropology and built environment, and she's a co-founder of the Art, Architecture and Design Practice Assemble, with whom she's been working for the 10 years. Yesterday, we've listened to Amica's annual reflection summary, and from that, I noted down this section, among other things, connecting near and far sight. At the end of all this, it's a pretty straightforward call to trust your own observations and to think about how to act on them. What have you seen? What have you thought? What have you felt? What is a bifocal attention which can see what is before it, but also shift and keep the long view in focus? How can we cultivate this simultaneous possibility which refuses the gap between practice and theory, but sees thinking, animating, doing, and doing transforming thinking? And today, Amica will talk about her work. Welcome again, Amica.
Thank you so much, and thank you for another really kind introduction, but also thank you everyone for waiting for me. I'm sorry I had the time down a little bit wrong, so entirely my fault, but thank you for your patience and persistence. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to test my screen share because I think I had some slight issues yesterday, so bear with me 1 second, and hopefully, how is that? Is that working?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So today I'm going to talk about our practice, Assemble, and I'm going to try and describe and illuminate not so much any projects specifically, but a set of threads that wind through the projects, which I think in the end are the things which produce the architecture and produce the processes which kind of constitute the body of our work. We are a collective, there are 20 of us, and so there is almost as many narratives about what we're doing and why we do it as there are projects and as there are people. And then when you expand outwards to look at the next layer of collaborators, that kind of possibility and that sense making multiply. So one of the things which I think is incredibly interesting about that and very instructive for someone who's trying to act in the built environment is to try and get your head around the relationship between decisive action and open-ended possibility. Our great friend and mentor, Richard Sennett, draws a distinction between the city as a closed system and the city as an open system. The idea that some kinds of design create openness and the possibility for things which have not yet been imagined to emerge. There's a certain looseness which allows for change and change of meaning over time, opposed to a closed system which tells you right from the beginning how to use it. And as pressure on the built environment increases and as the built environment is increasingly financialized, it becomes something of a fight to try and keep the thing that you design open as an open system, as the default starts to gradually slide in the opposite direction. So I'm going to just talk briefly about how we've thought about that in a range of different ways across a few projects and times. So the first image that I've chosen is an image of some of Assemble on a street in Granby in Liverpool, mixed in with the community that we're working with there. And this is Joe and Lewis. They've been making on the street, making fixtures and finishings, which again end up in the houses, which are owned by the community land trust that are on that street. How do I change this slide? So the first thing that I want to argue that we have learned over the last 10 years is that the means do produce the ends. Often in architecture, we think that we can work in one way and it can have an effect which is entirely different. We can work in a top-down directive mode and then produce an architecture which is social or relational or open-ended. I want to argue that that's a little bit of a trick of thinking. Actually, in order to create things that have multiple possibilities within them, you need multiple imaginations feeding into them, because it's in the interaction between different imaginations and different ways of working that overlaps, conflicts, and contradictions emerge. And those are the things which open space. This is a drawing of a project, one of our longest running projects in Assemble. And it might be slightly odd to call this a drawing of a project, because actually it's a drawing of an existing house on the street. But what it captures about the project is a mode of interacting with a place. In the back, you can see a makeshift workshop with someone from Assemble working with concrete and reclaimed bricks. In the center, you can see a kitchen which is being run as a part-time community cafe with a living room which is kind of an informal meeting room for different people in the community, and with a front room which is acting as a site office for a set of contractors who are working on the renovations on the street that we're working on the design for. And you can see the basement there being used to store building materials and other resources, and upstairs, space where people involved in the project are sleeping and working. And I think this image captures the attitude of the project and its essential meaning much more than any single fixed image of the design itself. Here you can kind of see it in slightly clearer terms and photographic terms, putting together a quick makeshift bit of scaffolding to create a workshop in which a fast and experimental process using materials available on the street for objects which are going to end up embedded in the houses that are being developed. You can see here a range of materials, which are a mixture of found, recovered, reclaimed, and bought, being pulled together to make a surface, to make an object, which is this terrazzo in the corner, which is unique to this place, and whose production is enabled by having been made in the place where it's destined. So it only really becomes financially viable to work with something like crushed or reclaimed bricks. At the moment, you can walk from your workshop directly outside to the street and take from the skip. So here you can kind of see that process animated. The skip, the mold, the houses where some walls are coming down from the inside, the process of mixing and the process of polishing, all kind of held together in a space. And the reason I'm really interested in this relatively humble piece of work, some might say, is because really it demonstrates the possibility of recovering architecture as a local practice rather than a global practice. Architecture is something which enables the person or a group of people to develop an ongoing, caring, responsible relationship with a place, rather than architecture as a service which is provided from a central point and which goes out. Here you can see the product in place, and here you can see it in a home that's been partially moved into, starting to be surrounded by other kinds of life. So how do we approach creating these kinds of possibilities? First of all, it's a practice which doesn't distinguish between making buildings and making other parts of material culture. We understand that the stuff that we touch every day affects our emotional well-being, our physical well-being, but more than that, it connects us to other people. When we handle a mass-produced object, often it represents extraordinary genius, actually, which is very hidden under its shiny surface, but it also disconnects us from that genius, from the care, from the invention that went into its production. So we're very interested in processes which introduce the mark of the maker and the mark of the hand, but without moving into very expensive craft practices. So here we can see some ceramic vessels that were made to go in a building that we designed, which have been fired with the byproduct of the beer that they're meant to handle with yeast in a kind of developed raku form. Understanding the genius and the extraordinary capacity that mass production represents by trying to engage with it and understand where moments of chance can be introduced. So this is us trying to get our heads around making toilets, working with the Armitage Shanks factory in the north of England, and engaging with this process, which is at once mechanized, but also still deeply reliant on the hands of hundreds of skilled makers that work in the factory. Every single toilet that comes out and ends up in the Screwfix catalogue is one of the most bought, one of the most common sanitary items in the UK. You can buy it for £100. Is hand finished. It has to be hand finished. There's no mechanized process. So it's kind of trying to insert ourselves and understand the different ways that the objects which surround us are produced and what the social consequences of the ways that they're made and the ways that they're present in our lives. This starts perhaps by a process which is involved with both making at the scale of furniture and making at the scale of buildings, starting with a practice which is absolutely about temporariness, but not about temporariness as an aspiration, but as temporariness as a means for experimentation and a creator of possibility. I think it's really kind of critical in this forum, particularly to engage with what the temporary is and what the temporary does, and understand it not as a good in itself, but as something that might be deployed or established to create possibilities where insertion into more formal and expensive or long-term processes is prohibitively difficult. So this is a temporary theatre that we built very early on, about 9 years ago, in Chichester, in the grounds of an established theatre, very beautiful Grade 1 listed established theatre to host a programme for its young directors. And then I think the interesting thing is to start to explore how these kinds of capacities and sensibilities can and can't insert themselves into more formal processes, which I think is actually a more interesting distinction than scale. I think it's very easy to talk about scaling up or scaling down, but actually I think the relationship between the formal and the informal, where practices which sit outside of very well-established economies can intersect with more formal practices which have a more easily understandable relationship to the business of building as an industry. This is a photograph, a set of photographs which come from a project, more recent project, about completed about 3 years ago in South London, where part of the work is being undertaken by very, very skilled contractors, supported and managed by a very experienced and supportive client. And part of the work is being delivered by our studio. So this is a prototype for a facade, which we made using standard industrial materials, which were then hand treated and pulled together using some special elements to create a kind of dialogue or mode of intersecting with a process which otherwise would have had to have been delivered through more standard methods. So here you can see it installed, and then you can see inside the gallery an approach to the existing and an approach to a mode of working, which involves being on site a lot, taking great care of what already exists and understanding where to intersect and what the value of the labor that you're commanding when you're making a drawing is. This is so this approach can extend to understanding the role of architecture as a way of creating possibility. This is a piece of social infrastructure, to use a kind of common contemporary parlance, but I would say a bit of public realm design, a stage, a soft stage, and an otherwise hard town square, which envelops some existing trees and was designed to prompt and enable social activity in a place that was relatively devoid of possibilities for coming together. And then this is a way of that thinking getting translated and expanded into a building, which again we built ourselves, which is a workspace which brings together the possibility of people continuing to collaborate, not only for special social moments, but actually to embed sharing space into an everyday working life. So it's a building which supports or contains low-cost workspace, small units set around a large shared space, which kind of bake in a level of interaction and modulation. So really what we're experimenting with here is how much you can do with design and how much you can do with process, and where process starts to feed into design, and where design can prompt or enable process. And it has this very decorative facade, and the idea of the facade was to turn the building outwards for it to enable a new kind of public space to emerge in the space that the building faces, which again became a prompt for profoundly social activity. And so we can then see this kind of strand of thought moving on to a more, you can see it kind of branching out into a set of projects which have a more deliberative approach to making space that enables making. This is a playground and children's charity we set up and have been working with in Glasgow for 2014, 7 years now. And it's a space which enables the process of play to gradually evolve and develop the space itself. This is a textile workshop in New Orleans, which is a place for gathering and enabling an existing culture of work with costume, textile, beading and tuffeting to have a home, which then makes it more approachable and allows other people to come and get involved. And then this extends to the workspaces that we manage, develop and run. So also understanding how we can situate our architecture practice in a context which is profoundly interested in the processes that make things and the economies that sit behind them, and in the kind of hand-based labor. And then that also extends outwards to kind of public versions of that. This is a workshop which acts a bit like a gym. You can buy a membership, and it kind of hosts a co-location of cafes and making spaces and professional making spaces. So this is really a kind of attempt to understand how you can permanentize, how you can make reliable and make enduring a culture that you can establish yourself through a process which you're involved in. What can you leave behind you when you stop being involved in a project, a set of infrastructures which are both social and built, which enables that process, that world-making process, to continue. So the thing I'll move on to next is, oops, let's turn this down, is a kind of set of thoughts about how we can start to expand our thinking as designers. Because when we think about design, we so often think about product design, really. We think about a process which develops an object, which is then finished, which then gets sent off and is made somewhere else, or in a more expanded version, potentially a process of making an object ourselves. But actually, through the process of being involved in making this work, the thing that gradually starts to emerge is an understanding that for most people, making as a mode of being is something which is both comfortable and instinctive. You can see it in children's play. When children are given space and time and materials, their play is a process of world making, world testing, reflection, and then world making. So however good your form is, however beautiful your piece of housing design might be, if it actively excludes by deliberation or by accident the possibility of people making their own worlds and continuing to adjust the world around them, then in some very important ways failed. And we think, or I think specifically, that adventure playgrounds offer an incredibly clear lesson in this. There's no end goal. There's no idea of a design which is supposed to be X or supposed to be Y, or a moment that it will be finished. If it could finish, it would fail. The point of the adventure playground is to give the material environment a set of qualities and capacities that enable every group or individual that comes and interacts with it to move into an active conversation with the material world, to test their own meaning in it, to make possibilities for new social action within it. So the provocation of this really is what happens if you start to think about the adventure playground not as a special site, but as just a prototypical public space, as a way of thinking about space in the city and how it might be occupied and understood a little bit differently to how we understand it now. It's very, very easy to start that process by thinking very grandly, by trying to understand the economics of city development, the policy of planning, but actually sometimes it's also just as easy, or perhaps even easier, to start with something a little bit more concrete, something which is already manifest, and something which is playing out or prefiguring, to kind of put it in the terms I was discussing yesterday, a way of being in the city that has a different set of possibilities to the set of possibilities we've become accustomed to. So I'm just going to very quickly, before I wrap up, talk a little bit about what kind of infrastructure makes this kind of work possible, because I've said already the means produce the end, the process produces the project. And one way of thinking about Assemble, particularly in the terms that I was discussing yesterday, is as an endless meeting. So I've taken the title of Francesco Paletta's book, again, Freedom is an Endless Meeting, which I can't recommend enough. And I think it's a good way of starting to contextualize the internal dynamics of a practice, both its limitations and its possibilities. So this is a diagram my colleague Fran did, which shows the evolution of our practice through time. And the thing that I think is most relevant to pull out of this, the reason it's interesting, is because the moments where the practice has been expanding or contracting or reformulating itself is always the moments when new possibilities emerge. When the practice is formalized, it becomes increasingly the case that it's only possible to do more kinds of formal work. When the practice has a slightly more elastic and social basis, then it becomes possible to do projects which are in themselves a little bit more elastic and social. So collective evolution understood as freedom being an endless meeting. But at the beginning, you have a very loose association of individuals. It gets condensed to a looser but more committed association of individuals. It starts to get formalized into roles which support the collective maintenance, the sustenance of that group. It then expands and contracts through a set of different configurations which deliver and enable projects, and then starts to take on at some point some of the qualities of a more formal office, which having formalized a long way, actually now that process of formalization is being slightly reversed. So I think the reason I'm talking about this is because even the way that you conceive of and deliver projects, aside from the process, which is internal to the projects themselves, we believe just as the way you make an object transforms and ends up substantiated in that object, the way you make a project, right from your personal and social organization within your team, through to the process that you can support, through to the outcome, they're all connected. A non-relational process cannot produce a relational architecture. This is a slightly more formal way of looking at it that looks like a kind of company history. And one thing that I wanted to show with this diagram is that social and commercial infrastructures are often just as important as built infrastructures. You can see on this slide a range of different organizations which are themselves now independent, which have emerged from projects and remain in order to sustain them. So Granby Workshop, a ceramics factory in Liverpool, Baltic Street Adventure Playground, which is a registered charity in Scotland, Black Horse Workshop, community interest company, the House Veneta, which is an emerging charity based on a conversation about land rights and freedom to occupy, which is in Brick Lane. And then some other emerging projects like Assemble Play, which may, as an association of play workers, which is pulling itself away now from the architecture practice to enable itself to be established more independently. So what are the rules? The rules are that any rule can be changed and that anyone can propose a rule. I really enjoy signage and the way that groups and communities talk to each other. And I think that this sign, which is from the Assemble office, creates some kind of clarity around the social nature of the organization itself. So to return to process makes project, social relations can create space, as in a community land trust, as in a practice, and space can also create social relations, as in a system which is open or a system which is closed, a playground which is fixed, or an adventure playground which is built by the children itself. Space and social relations are interdependent and co-effective. Practice and the form of architecture have a similar reciprocal capacity. Particular forms of practice can make particular kinds of architecture possible, and particular kinds of architecture can in themselves feed back into the ongoing development of a practice. When we talk about planned making, we're very familiar with this process, that you do something, the object changes, you respond to what you've done, and the object changes, you respond to what you've done again, and the object changes. This is what David Pye called the workmanship of risk, that you're in an active conversation with the material world, that it's talking back to you. That's kind of the definition of craft practice, I think. The thing that I want to point out is that practice itself has the same character. The projects you do change who you are, they change how you think, and that then feeds back into your practice. Once you get into a very fixed and formal form, that process of evolution has to happen within particular bounds. And in some ways, those bounds can be incredibly effective, and in other ways, they can be quite limiting. The question is, as the world changes around us, how can the way that we interact with it as businesses, as groups, as social formations continue to evolve in response? The extraordinary thing that we face now as architectural educators, and I think probably educators in any field, is an increasing understanding that what we know now will not be adequate for the people that we're teaching. There will not be an adequate resource for them to respond to the future that they're facing. We no longer know what it is that the people who are younger than us will need to know to deal with their future. Perhaps that's always been the case, but at the moment, we're particularly aware of that. But that's also the case when it comes to business and industry and practice. We're no longer, I think, at a point in history where we can be sure, I think in any realm of activity, that continuing to do what we've done before will produce a future which is safe. In fact, we're kind of facing exactly the opposite of that. There's a little bit of a question here about how we reflect, how we evolve, and how that relates to much bigger industrial, commercial, and political contexts. This is a really lovely set of illustrations, I think, that my colleague did. And I think what she's trying to show here is the way that different strands of practice, different ideas, can create complex interrelations over time. And how practice isn't linear, but like a built project, it's often cyclic. There's a respond and a change and a respond and a change, and sometimes it can take years for an understanding to evolve or to develop out of an event. So just quickly going to flick through a couple of examples of that process. relationships and collectivity, an initial project which was made possible by a group of people coming together and responsibly evolving design in a project from a context and also from what materials were available. That was our first project that we did together. It's called the Cinerolium, and it was a total improvisation based on what materials, social, physical resources we could corral, and involved lots of labor, but lots of improvisation, which then, unexpectedly 5 years on, gives us a kind of understanding about collective and community action, which enables us to move into a responsive relationship with the Community Land Trust, which in a much longer term and more sustained way had developed a similar set of processes to deal with the life on their own streets. And you can see here this incredible vision of life and possibility in which is a little island in a very, very run down and you might say even abandoned area of the city. So we take the sensibility of trying to understand how to work together, how to be resourceful, how to respond to things at hand, to then work both with another group of people who are working on similar terms and with an existing set of infrastructures to develop a project which is in many senses a piece of relational architecture in the sense that it's been produced by a set of relationships in order to sustain that set of relationships moving on into the future. So it's creating a permanent home for that activity of collective planting and caretaking that had happened on that street. But it's also planted and grown from the plants that are on that street and creating a residency space there, which means new energy can continually be unfolded into that residential community in order to keep that process moving in the long term. The other thing that we're really interested in that's emerged through this is the idea of meaningful work. What does it mean to be able to connect what you do to what happens in the world? And we're going to look at this from a very, maybe quite modest, quite simple point of view. How does that manifest in the activity of making? On this slide, you can see a refurbished bathroom. And on this slide, you can see the tiles which are used to refurbish that bathroom getting manufactured in a workshop on the same street through a process of careful, hand-sensitive labor, a process which is designed to enable anyone of any level of skill to come and engage with it. And this process then evolves and extends into lots of other projects, getting very interested in the ways that the machinery of mass production can combine with the labor of the hand to make things which mean that the people that are actually physically producing the architecture have a meaningful role, a meaningful influence over its final manifestation. So we don't any longer see architecture as the act of instruction, but the act of building. This is an example of that I wanted to talk about just for a little bit, just to kind of bring it together. This is an industrial round press, which was brought into the Granby workshop, which up to that point had been a place of predominantly hand making. And you could then combine a set of handmade techniques with the industrial press to create objects which were both efficient but also individually completely unique. This also can manifest at the scale of architecture. Here we're looking at a project where we're working with a group of musicians to use the rubble that was on a site next to the venue that they were all collected around, bagging it in misprinted 10-kilo rice bags and stacking them up to create an acoustically hospitable space for informal music rehearsal. Basically the only thing of acknowledged value that goes into to create this building all the way up to the roof structure is the sweat equity, the labor of the people who are involved in bagging and stacking. So here we just come back to the RAM press to look at this again, and understand that kind of sensibility just drawn out through a single object. So we move from making tableware with this machine to making tiles, to making encaustic tiles that can go outside, and then elaborating a series of other things that can be made using that same clay, and then seeing how the things which are produced through that process can animate or extend to lots of different contexts. So here you can see some tiles that have been made by a community group, a workshop in Liverpool.
Excuse me, Amica, just a note that we are 5 minutes over time, and
Okay.
we should continue with the program.
Okay, this is the last slide.
Finish.
Last slide. So ending up in a community garden very far away that is sustained and run by a different group. And so I just wanted to end with that thought. Freedom is an endless meeting. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for creating a wonderful reflection yesterday and for being our special guest this year. We continue now with the program.
Pleasure. Yeah.
We will take a short break just in order that you have time to join the discussion in the 3 sessions that will start now. The first session is Revisiting Histories, and it will be moderated by Danica Prodanovic and Manuel Henriksson. Danica comes from Belgrade Association of Architects that organizes Belgrade International Architecture Week, and Manuel Henriksson comes from Lisbon Architecture Triennale. They will be joined by fellows Anna Ulrike Andersen from Halden in Norway, from Collective.6 from Barcelona, and from a team of OASI, Alvaro Alcazar del Aguila, Roser Garcia Lido, Eduard Liguares y Asensio, Sergio Sangali Borrego. I apologize if I pronounced any of these names wrongly. And they come from Borrego. The second session is the transdisciplinary session, and it is moderated by Freo Majer from Forecast in Berlin and John Bingham Hall from Theatrum Mundi, based in Paris in London. They will be joined by Erika Henriksson from Trondheim in Norway, by Julia Udall from Sheffield, and by Monika Marinova from Burgas in Bulgaria. The third session is the paradigm shift session, and this one is moderated by Saimir Christo from Tirana Design Week, and he will be joined by fellows L'Atelier Senzu from Paris, by Willem Hubrechts from Brussels, and by Puzzle from Skopje.
It seems to be working.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hiya. I think you might need to make Alex DeLittle the host as well, co-host with us. Aha. Let's see if I can. How do we know when we're live?
Says live.
We are live.
Okay, we're live. Great. Hi, everyone. Sorry. Is Sasha able to make Alex co-host so he can join us? Perhaps while that's happening, we might just, Freo, oh, Alex, hello.
Hey.
Yeah, perhaps well, you're here now anyway, but we'll just open the room. Sorry, it's all quite new. I'm so impressed with the team from Mao, with Sasha, with Majer. Like, well done. This is quite a feat. It's a serious logistical feat, and it seems to be going really smoothly. So thank you so much. And yeah, well done for that. Welcome to the Transdisciplinary room, where we are all transdisciplinary. We are all kind of coming from quite different backgrounds, ways of working, and I think we're going to look a bit into what that means. And I suppose I think the reason that so Freo and myself have been asked to host this room, I think because we both run organization, well, we both perhaps individually, I started out life studying music and became an urbanist of some kind. I'm still not sure what that means exactly. And also I now run an organization called Theatrum Mundi that is very much about facilitating transdisciplinary collaboration between artists, particularly performing artists and urbanists, taking the idea of the world as a stage, as a framework for understanding public life through the lens of performance, and kind of bringing together artists and city makers to kind of draw on all of the crafts of the stage, moving, sounding, writing, composing, to kind of analyze and intervene in the infrastructures for culture and public life. So I think that's why I've been asked to do this. I'll hand over to Freo to say a little bit more.
I used to be an opera director in my early youth, and now I'm artistic director of a mentorship program based in Berlin, Forecast, and also initiator of a research program, a 3-year-long research program called Driving the Human, which deals with the question how we as humans or human mammals might inhabit our habitat called Earth in the future in a sustainable, innovative, appealing way, maybe. And yeah, maybe you guys would like to say a few words about yourselves and your work, and then we have some suggestions how to discuss things today.
Perhaps before we kick off, I might just kind of let the audience, the public out there, which we can't see, but we're all here together in Zoom, just to say a little bit what we kind of had in mind, so people kind of know what where we're going. We are going to just invite all of the people in the room to kind of introduce themselves very briefly, but particularly a bit of, you know, this idea of disciplinarity and kind of which space you come from, what language that you bring with you, or kind of tools or ways of thinking you bring with you from there. Although we'll try to do that quite quickly. Obviously, everyone's had the chance, hopefully, to kind of meet all of the institutions and the fellows and the ideas and the projects through the rooms. But then we've just invited everyone to kind of pick one word from the way that somebody else describes their work, and a word that kind of perhaps might not make sense in their own practice, or might have a different meaning, and to just kind of ask them what that word means as a way to kind of look into this idea of interdisciplinarity. But so yeah, perhaps we'll just come to hearing from all of you, and then kind of say a little bit more about that idea and where that comes from, this kind of form of discussion.
And one additional remark, the audience is always invited to type in their questions into the chat. We'll be happy to discuss those later.
Julia, would you like to start?
Great. Oh, thank you, John. Yeah, I'm Julia Udall. I'm trained as an architect, and I'm an architectural educator in Sheffield Hallam University in the UK, where I lead the 4th year of the MArch course. I studied in Glasgow and then Sheffield University, and my PhD was looking at commoning in relation to the community purchase of a cutlery factory to save it from the loss of the kind of crafts industries within the city. My postdoctorate was looking at kind of energy and industry and the use of scenario making. It was called Stories of Change. And I guess just to say, Did you want us to say now a little bit about the kind of terms or disciplinary kind of thing that we've written? Great. Okay, so a lot of my research is around kind of commoning. So within that are kind of questions of community economies and how we kind of sustain ourselves, thinking about our ecological relations, and also thinking about kind of spatial pedagogies and how we might learn in a kind of democratic way together. And I guess underpinning that all is a kind of awareness of kind of practices of care.
Thanks so much. I'm kind of going in the order I see you on my screen. I'd like to suggest perhaps Erika, you.
Yes. Hello, I'm Erika. I'm an educated architect, and I work in a form of altering practice of architecture. Where I see I got the light in my. I often work performative and practice-based or project-based by exploring topics that concerns that kind of surrounds architecture and spatial making, but through often like combining craft and hands-like construction processes with relational processes. Right now, I'm finalizing my practice-based PhD in Trondheim, which is also kind of the making of the concept that I have searched through landscapes of care with. It's called Performing Architherapy, the crafting of a relational practice for pairing relations. I thought maybe I'll say something about the making of this, because it's also this project been performed as a 4-year-long for this concept, which is Architherapy. I see it both as a concept, an idea that you can think with, but also as a practice that consists of techniques and approaches for building and engaging with architecture. And it's been taking form by a 4-year-long fieldwork project that's been kind of framed by the transformation of a building. And this transformation started by the collaboration between me and 2 people living at the rehabilitation clinic who had found an abandoned building that they wished to transform as a way of discussing and thinking about therapy. They were in a situation where they were very disappointed with the kind of therapy that they were getting at the clinic where they were living, and wanted to kind of discuss therapy through transforming a building. And this is where I met them, and the 3 of us formed a group that was working out this together. So it was a kind of combination of me thinking about coming from architecture and wanting to question and thinking about architecture, and then thinking about therapy and what therapy could be in a way that they wanted to questioning it. And this concept has been taking form, and practice has been taking form by us discussing and thinking about this through transforming a building, one can say. And what I have brought into this, I have been the one who's been kind of the leader of this project, or the driving motor of it. It's been many different people who've been coming and going, but there's been a constant kind of an idea of therapy as a way of constructing relations and caring relations to different entities part of it. It's been the motor, or that's been framing it. And then I've been searching to meet this idea in techniques and ways of building and approaches of thinking and working together that are architectural.
Thanks so much. John, would you like to step in?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm John Orleck. My background is in architecture. I'm part of a director of an architecture practice called Studio Polpo with Julia and others. Alongside that, I've been doing a PhD, which I've just finished, which looks at artist-led approaches to housing. So in relation to kind of the theme of transdisciplinarity, I think what's interesting there is that I was entering an organization that was run by artists, and I was exploring the role of artistic kind of methods and approaches within housing, but also becoming interested in institutions which were run as an artistic practice, and where artist-led practices folded into the running and management of an organisation. And I think we can talk more about the sonic acts of noticing as a project later. But I should maybe also say a little bit about Studio Polpo and the ways in which we run projects. We work collaboratively. Often we spend kind of a long time, often working locally in Sheffield, building long-term relationships with people from diverse kind of backgrounds and disciplinary backgrounds. And are also exploring how organisations can act as platforms for practices of commoning, and amongst others.
Wonderful, thank you. Monika.
Hi, I'm Monika. My background is also in architecture. I'm originally from Bulgaria, but my entire architectural education was in the United Kingdom. I graduated just under 2 years ago, and in the previous 1 year, I have been back in Bulgaria, and the project, which is part of Future Architecture, has played a really large role in both my experience in the UK and in Bulgaria, in the sense that projects that I've been engaged with, whether they are public or not, have been influenced by the approach that this project developed toward architecture and toward unveiling problems that we encounter when we actually have to intervene in a place with something completely new, and finding ways to type our completely new ideas back into this place.
Thank you. And finally, Alex, and of course, we kind of should have said, I don't know if it's clear to everyone watching, but we have 3 members of the team for Sonic Acts of Noticing here. So I don't know if you kind of also want to like bring in mentioning a bit more about the project as well, as the kind of the last person from that team to speak.
Great, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me okay. My name's Alex Tillittle, and similarly to Freo and John, I've got a background in music. So I was originally really interested in composition, and then I moved into this kind of broader field of sound studies. Now I would say I'm a sound practitioner, sound researcher, and I'm a postdoctoral research fellow in the School of Media and Communications at University of Nottingham, in the School of Music at the University of Leeds, and I'm an honorary research fellow in the Centre for Sound Practice Research at Goldsmiths in London. And yeah, I'm really interested in the idea of sound as an anti-discipline, the possibility of the kind of the affordances of sound and listening to think through and across disciplines in productive ways to kind of challenge existing ways of being and knowing. So I'm interested in the kind of alternate knowledges that might be found there. And my research kind of currently is around sound curation in museums, but I'm also my PhD research and kind of continuing research is really about kind of testing the spatial and the social. And that kind of hinges nicely onto talking a little bit about sonic active noticing. This is a project that brings together Julia and John, who you've heard from already, 2 architects and educators, with me, a kind of sound practitioner and researcher, to explore the potential of listening as a way to remake space in a way that kind of emphasizes care, mutuality, possibilities for relating to others, both human and non-human. And we do that through a machine, a web listening machine that collides textual artifacts, modes of writing, reflective writing, quotation, provocation, with audio. So we temporally code text to audio and have kind of developed a new way of reading sound or listening to text. We're looking forward to kind of sharing a little bit more about that later.
Thank you. John, shall I say a few words about the new European Bauhaus?
Sure.
You guys may have noticed that there's an incredible thing happening. We don't know actually what is happening, but the name is there already, which is the new European Bauhaus. And so this event is also meant to discuss this concept maybe, or to prepare a discussion or whatever. And John and I wondered what about Bauhaus might interest us at all. And I personally would say that there's something tragic about what happened to Bauhaus, its achievements and heritage. And I think it's basically a conceptual cleansing and simplification of Bauhaus, which has to do with the collapse of Weimar Republic maybe, but also later with a dominating culture of a very aggressive international market, lusting for products, architectural and design products, of course. There's a word in German that is always translated as education, which is Bildung. Maybe formation would be a bit better for that. And Bildung does not mean a social task or convention or dogma, but it rather suggests an individual, even unconscious process that is organic and slow and almost passive. And it basically implies that somebody keeps his or her senses receptive and the brain working. And I would say that Bildung was basically the basis for building at the Bauhaus. And so we found a poster, a very early poster of a Bauhaus history in 1919, and they promoted an event. Actually, it was one of the regular festivities that they promoted with this poster. And this poster states 3 terms: unser Spiel, unser Fest, unsere Arbeit, which is our game, our fest, our work. And so basically these students really, of course, learned a lot about craft, material, forms, aesthetics, whatever. But every single Saturday throughout the history of Bauhaus, the whole institution, everybody involved celebrated a fest, playing instruments, performing work sometimes, but not every Saturday, dancing and drinking a lot. And there was a very modern practice involved called CEx among students and professors and between students and professors, which usually is ignored by literature on the Bauhaus. So we thought a game might be interesting or a promising starting PowerPoint for our conversation. And I think John has developed a very simple and very appealing basic rule for it, which is?
Yeah, as I was mentioning earlier, we suggested to each of the participants that they might choose one word from the videos that people presented, or even just from the way people speak about their work now that kind of doesn't make sense or kind of has a different meaning, and that each in turn, everyone knows who they're asking, will kind of pass that word on, in a sense, to the next person who'll be asked just to kind of, simply explain what they mean by it, to kind of have a bit of a back and forth about it. And I suppose try to reach an end point where we circle towards perhaps this set of terms which might end up overlapping, that might end up doubling up, that become a kind of set of concepts for interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity, but perhaps also what's difficult about it. Perhaps the things that we kind of have between different kind of forms of practice that actually we think perhaps translate, but then actually we're using them in very different ways. These are the some of the problems of the idea of transdisciplinarity. And for me, it's a very kind of, this is a very kind of personal or very kind of close thing for Theatrum Mundi. I mean, we're always trying to kind of act as translators, network builders, kind of mediators, facilitators between, say, choreographers, script writers, and composers, and then architects, urban planners, even policymakers, etc. And I suppose I was thinking a bit about how we frame knowledge transfer between those different fields. You know, we're kind of always trying to avoid a situation where we're kind of saying urbanism is the center and we're kind of reaching out and taking knowledge from other places. And so I was kind of, you know, we're trying to aim for an idea where actually these meetings are kind of equally productive for all those who kind of come into them. So I was kind of thinking of a set of questions in a way for transdisciplinarity generally, which kind of informs the idea of this kind of simple game where also the participants in this conversation kind of pass ideas onto one another rather than coming directly from us as chairs. So I was thinking about, you know, in terms of transdisciplinarity, what directions does knowledge move in? Does transdisciplinarity mean being in a middle ground in between practices? Does it mean transferring from one to another? Or is it actually a kind of third place apart from the two starting points that we come from? But then also what's lost in translation? What's lost in transdisciplinarity? Is there room for disagreement? Do we have to kind of have consensus in this kind of third place or this shared ground, or can we disagree with the ways one another do things, or indeed with the ways one another define concepts? So yeah, with these kind of things of lost in translation, disagreements over definition, kind of being between or passing on in kind of different directions, these were kind of some of the ethos we had for this kind of idea of changing the kind of direction of this conversation a little bit. So with that in mind, I think what we're going to do is pass on to Julia again to ask Erika about a word.
Hi, Erika. I loved your project and I'm really excited we're in the same session because I think there's lots of kind of commonalities. The word that really kind of struck me was rehabilitation. I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about that.
Rehabilitation.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah, it's it's interesting because it's a word I haven't thought so much about. It's I guess it comes from it being a rehabilitation clinic that I've been relating to, and I think, I mean, it's really interesting. I didn't expect getting this word, and I think in a way I have been very uninterested in it. It's yeah, it's nothing that has kind of influenced my my way of thinking. It's I will say first, like because it's very kind of, the practice is very kind of anchored to my practice or me being embodied in a field, and I've been working very closely to a rehabilitation clinic and I've been engaging in it, but it's like my presence of being there has been or the project has been very much kind of searching to form a link between the rehabilitation clinic and the society. But for me, I think I have searched to not regard it as so much as a clinic, but to see it as a place where there is a lot of people to engage with. So it's, and I think I have not so much thought of this word, or it's not a word that is mine. If I
just wondered in terms of the kind of interest in ecology, and I guess kind of I suppose it has these kind of quite formal connotations associated with a kind of medical treatment, but
yeah,
what might it kind of mean for architecture and in terms of relationships with one another, but also the places around us? And it struck me that the kind of what you were bringing in terms of relationships with materials or relationships with one another was kind of really kind of closely connected with that.
Yeah, I guess, yes. I think it's because I have a problem with it. I always struggle with how to frame this project and to kind of just present that I've been working closely to a clinic and with people living in a clinic, because I don't want to pass on that people would think that I in a way see myself as somebody that come in and offer rehabilitation or offer treatment or offer therapy to somebody, because this has never been my role. It's really been about seeing it more in a conceptual way, or how partly I could collaborate with people being in treatment and finding where we could meet each other and explore a certain topic. But there has never been my kind of intention to rehabilitate someone, actually. So it's a word that just kind of, for me, it has some kind of authoritative association, or that somebody comes in and rehabilitate, or it's, I don't know. I felt when you said it, I'm like, no, I don't want to talk about this word.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And it's very, it's good. It's, I had this kind of thought, which words would be brought up, and this was not that I thought of. So it's very interesting. And also that, you know, I want to communicate something about my project, and then a word comes in that that's apparently it's connected to what I'm doing. So it's interesting.
I suppose I just wondered if there was a kind of challenge to that word, I suppose, through the way that you were working.
Yes, I guess it is. And it, I mean, for me, I also struggle a lot with therapy and architherapy, because I feel that it's constantly being misunderstood. And then I have kind of decided to stick with it because of this, and because there is this kind of, it can shift and it can be questioned. And I don't, you know, for me, I feel that since I started studying architecture, I've been kind of questioning it and trying to understand what it could be. And then therapy also being a practice and a concept that is quite problematic within Western culture. And then combining these two, for me, it's like, I don't know, in a way, I like working with things and combining things that I don't sit so well with, but at the same time, I understand that this communicates also myself or who I am. But
I think it's really interesting and instructional about how there's, for all of us, without doubt, there's words embedded into our projects and the ways we talk about them that we've kind of forgotten about. They're there somewhere. Yeah. And actually, when you kind of become aware of them, you realize you don't really have kind of an ownership over them, or they don't really sit. And I suppose the word rehabilitation is very key in our current moment, because I think that you know, national governments are looking to kind of bring us back to the normal and a state of health you know, after the pandemic, and we're looking to rehabilitate kind of the economy or society or whatever. And it's kind of, I think there has been some discussion around, of course, going back to a previous state versus kind of transforming towards something else, which is brought about by a moment of crisis. And I suppose this could be relevant to personal crisis as much as it is to a kind of, global health crisis as well.
I think it's also always interesting with these words that have the or that has something that is like going back to, because usually this going back to never existed, but we want to kind of create an idea that we had something that was good and now something went bad and we're going to go back to it. But usually this never, like taking back this word, reframing, refocusing is usually always about something new, but we want to create the idea that we are going back to something normal, right? Or an original state.
Exactly. Perhaps let's keep moving around and kind of also see how some of these things might then recombine as we come back all together. Erika, would you like to ask John?
Yes. My word to you is high street. For me, this was, it was a word that I mostly like, you can whatever you want, but it was also like the meaning of it in your project and why high street.
Yeah, thanks for allowing us to expand on that. It's really interesting. I mean, there's a kind of practical kind of point of departure for the high street for us, which is that Studio Polpo were invited to exhibit at the Venice Biennale, which will be happening this year. The overall theme was kind of the privatization of public space. And within that overall theme, we were given the high street as a space to explore. So initially, the high street kind of came from that. However, we see that kind of the use of the tool as being potentially broader and can be deployed and used in different spaces. But for me, I guess the high street means a lot of things. And I suppose one of the things we were really keen to do was to shift away from the understanding of the high street, which positioned them simply as spaces of kind of consumption or shopping or places of buying. And I think before the pandemic, this was a kind of emerging idea. People were talking about how high streets need to move away from retail. And I think it's only been kind of exacerbated and amplified with lockdown. So on one level, it means more than retail. But I think on a kind of personal level, it's also a really interesting sort of site of encounter with others. It's often the first space you go to when you're a child and you're allowed to kind of leave the house. It is a space in which you interact and develop kind of belongings and citizenships with others. And Susan Hall talks about this a lot. So does that go some way in answering the question? Do you want to prod me further?
No, for me, I mean, I Googled it also, and I understand that it's a typical kind of main street thing. But for me, it first sounded more like just listening to the words, like high street. If it was, I was mostly interested if it stood out or it meant something for you also, that it was like, this is like a site we want to operate in for these reasons. And if it had some extended meaning. I understand that it's like a physical street, but it was also, for me, it's a word that I almost never heard.
It's certainly a very, very British term, which doesn't.
I understood so.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that I bring up something that is very kind of basic for you, but for me, it stood out. So.
But for that very reason, again, so important to become aware of it as like a very specific kind of a thing.
I think this is really interesting, and I will try to draw a parallel between Erika's project and Sonic Acts, because from the ongoing discussion, I feel like whereas Erika is talking about masonry meditation, which I think is a really interesting term, because for me, meditation is something that happens in the mind, but in her project, meditation is something that happens through making and tactile, the enrichment you get from touching and forming and achieving something by yourself. And then with your project, maybe I would call it social meditation, because you're enabling people through the project to immerse in this environment, straight in it. The voice recordings are so rich that you are immediately moved to that place, and you are getting all of the benefits just from 1 second of this recording.
John, did you want to respond any more about high streets and social meditation?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I mean, a lot of the deep listening activities, which I'll leave Alex to speak to more directly, but they are a form of meditation sometimes. And I think when you take some of these kind of listening practices, which are quite meditative, and apply them to the high streets, it's really, really, I think it's a really nice fit. It fits really nicely, thinking about the high street as this kind of site of meditation and site of care, and as opposed to this sort of site of consumption. Totally.
Sorry.
No, for me, I think it was really, it was really nice, this combination of that the video brought forward this thing of being able to explain and say something, but then also just having moving images and sound. Because for me, when I saw the presentation or the video of your project, when you had this scene on the barber shop and you could hear the sound, suddenly I felt like I understood the project. Like, you know, you hear things, you see things, and then when this came out, I was like, okay, now I got something about what it was. And I think this was really nice that you can work on these different levels.
John, would you like to ask Monika your word?
Absolutely. I was really interested in the project, how you were talking about kind of performances between the kind of civic and the personal. And I guess I wanted to sort of, with that in mind, ask you to talk a little bit more about the word stage. I know it's the title of your project, and I don't want to do that to try and interrogate the kind of the project as a whole, but I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about what you mean by stage and who's performing.
I think very often the conditions that we encounter, for example, we're witnessing the abandonment of the high street. Erika is witnessing the abandonment of ductility and human scale. And in this project, I was witnessing some neglection of history and some stigma in the context. And then we as practitioners, whether we feel it's wrong or right to endorse decisions that happen in city making, if we forget this, our opinion about things, then at least I think we have a certain responsibility to exhibit something and to allow the people who use our projects and our architecture to create opinions for themselves. And then the role of our projects is to give people a certain information, a set of information to exhibit something. And then the stage becomes this place that is able to translate all of these ideas and allow people to use them in some way or to inhabit them in some way. And then in this sense, I think the stage, even though performance is something you're looking at, it's the center of attention, the stage is a certain background which allows you to inhabit the foreground of this stage.
Thanks. I think I was really interested when you were talking about the relationship between architecture and exhibition, and actually challenging the idea that you might exhibit architecture, but actually architecture is exhibition. I think it's quite an interesting prompt.
Yeah, and there is always, I think people always encounter this, what is the role of your architecture, and you are always thinking how much of the space around it should it influence. And obviously when you build something material, it is always speaking about something, it's speaking about the things that influence itself. But then our projects are just a certain point in a timeline. So in this sense, these projects should be aware that they will be only an episode in something that is going to keep going on. So whatever they're exhibiting should allow this connection between the things that come before them and the things that happen after them. So it's very fragile and difficult to set this relationship between what it exhibits and yeah.
And time-based, yeah.
Freo, as someone who comes from the world of opera, I don't know, I feel like obviously it's a very Theatrum Mundi thing. I feel like we could talk for hours about the stage. I find it such a curious spatial phenomenon and all of the things it can do and all of the different things that can kind of be stages that don't necessarily all look exactly the same, but also all of the infrastructure that's behind the stage to enable it to be the center of attention as well. I don't know kind of what role you see the stage playing in the city. It'd be interesting to hear a bit about opera. And
please.
I think in the context, maybe more specifically within this project, when you hear, so the this word stage hints at a place where you should go and you should point your attention to. And the word is used strategically to invite these decisions within the city, to decide to go somewhere and to decide that there should be attention to a specific place in order to create some sort of spatial cohesion, draw people towards a certain place, because we have acknowledged that there should be spaces like this where our efforts are concentrated, which are spaces where we can exchange socially and not disperse and lose the energy of a large body of people being in one place.
Coming back to your question, John, for me personally, a theater is not the kind of stage that we've been discussing now, maybe, because I mean, all my teachers were East German, I mean, real East German communist directors. And so I, as one of the first Western people studying with them, learned a concept of theater that is, of course, public in a way because there's an audience, but at the same time, very much protected, like a habitat that is completely not isolated, but it is really safe. It is a safe space for thinking, experimenting with critique, questioning things, enlightened discourse maybe. And so maybe in my personal biography, theater is really rather like a temple, you know, like a place where very strange things may happen that can lead anywhere, and that have so many layers of meaning or being useful or being material for thinking, or so that maybe in my perspective, a theater is not a stage within a city, but a very like a known planet or something. And of course, the German theater system is really like an own. In German, we say biotope. Is that such a word in English? Biotope? Yeah. Like a bit biological system of interactions and very strange species still surviving after so many centuries.
By way of continuing to bridge disciplines, I wondered if I just might offer the provocation of theatre as practice as well here, in relation to this idea of the city as stage, maybe more broadly, and thinking through people like the work of Augusto Boal and his practice theatre of the oppressed, the idea of not something physical, but something which unfolds, which is deployed to bring people together in various ways, play through situations, and ultimately create change. And yeah, extending from what Freo said via Monika, this idea really compels me.
Yeah, I think it's clear that the kind of, you know, for all of us in different ways, performativity actually is really crucial. And obviously the stage is a kind of core idea within that. But I think as we're seeing, that can represent really a lot of things. So it kind of, but maybe it's just me coming from where I, you know, coming from a Theatrum Mundi perspective, but it feels like it's quite a kind of core point to actually talk about all sorts of things about what we mean around kind of paying attention, performing, experimenting, bringing people together, but then all of the kind of layers that go on underneath that. But we'll save that perhaps if we've got time to come back to it. And Monika, would you like to ask Alex your word?
Yes. Alex, as I understand, you're from the team, you're most embedded with the actual making of music, I think. And for me, sounds and audio are something very personal, very subjective and fluid. And then when I was researching about your project, I came across the word strategies, which I obviously am picking out this word, but so I'm wondering what is your opinion about the relationship between the more subjective and personal dimensions of the project and the more strategic set, maybe targets or tools that you employ or find to be useful as you progress through seeing how the project develops?
Wow, thanks, Monika. That's really got a lot of depth to it, that provocation, and there's a lot to speak to there. I think starting with this idea of the emotional depth of sound and listening, this is something that is kind of, well known and clearly very situated, very personal. Our experience is our experience. And this is something which in a sense, one has to say is to a certain extent inaccessible. It's never possible to fully translate the sort of embodied and situated experience of listening, the transience, the ephemeral nature of sound and listening in public spaces. This is something that people like Brandon LaBelle write very well on. However, for me, the notion of a strategy is something which operates somehow within this field to move forwards in a particular direction in response to maybe a set of concerns or hunches, and something which may be deployed, something which may be possibly picked up across disciplines, and which may function differently due to the situated nature of sound, due to this kind of personal depth, may function differently in different ways for different people. But yes, I think keep listening, to go back to what John said, is something that I fall back on a lot in my practice and might be worth just introducing briefly here. This is a practice which really I see to be one of the kind of core listening strategies that exists, I suppose. It was left behind by an artist composer named Pauline Oliveros, who passed in 2016. And her life work, rather than developing compositions, developing objects of sound, if you like, was about composing situations of listening. It was about assembly. It was about this idea of listening as a forum. And she called her pieces human algorithms, which I really like the idea of. So this possibility to kind of arrange subjectivities around sonic stimuli in different ways. And for those subjectivities to communicate, to bring up that emotional depth in various ways, so as to recalibrate our understanding of those stimuli in ways that might be productive, that might be agonistic, that might be provocative in all sorts of different ways. And this is how I would sort of describe, this is at the very center of my practice, is to being inspired by people like Oliveros. How may we take this forwards? How might we deploy strategies, not writing about sound, not objects of sonic work, but ways of sonic doing, ways of sonic being that do things and that might be tested and deployed and acted with. I'll leave it there for the moment.
I mean, just to add very briefly, you mentioned kind of tools as well, and I think the kind of, perhaps the strategy comes a little bit in terms of using the website as a pedagogical tool that can evolve in relation to the different communities we can work with. So we've developed a back end that's kind of quite accessible, and the idea is that we can continue to add sonic compositions, we can continue to add textual artifacts, and that the tool kind of grows and changes with different kind of communities and organizations and situations.
Yeah, I could pick up there actually. I think now's probably a really good time to say that our tool is now live. The website is now online. I've posted the link in the chat window. Maybe just to describe actually a little bit about what it does and what it is, for the benefit maybe of the wider audience too. And thinking about so I guess I was just describing the idea of a strategy quite sort of theoretically and broadly, but maybe more precisely how the strategy that we have developed here is one where we we engage in these practices of deep listening in city spaces and high street spaces, and then further recording. And these recordings are edited into kind of collages or compositions, which form a basis for processes of critical listening, reflective listening to these recordings, and then writing. And our tool collides kind of pieces of writing with audio. It's a way of reading sound or listening to text, if you like, and it temporally evolves. So the writing is coded to the audio, and as you listen, textual artifacts jump up on the page and sort of disrupt listening, amplify listening, dissonate listening in different ways. And it speaks from the subjectivity of the writer to the subjectivity of the listener. So there's this collision of subjectivities, if you like, this emotional depth is kind of extrapolated across people, and we're interested in what that can do, both directly and immediately, but also further to processes of design and thinking about space.
Monika, did you want to respond at all about strategies, and is that something you think of in your own work?
I was actually trying to maybe think of what my strategy could be if I want to create more sonic doing. And I was thinking that in the same way we try to design, use certain materials to produce certain visual or tactile effect, listening to something in such a kind of isolated environment without seeing people moving really made me think that I would also like to design for how the space will sound when it is in use, and avoid certain materials that are not so pleasant to hear. And maybe because sound doesn't actually have obviously graphic representation, we maybe neglect it to a certain extent in the design process, which is very disconnected with the sound that is produced in the space when it is in use. So I found the project a very useful test.
I think that's really fascinating, and you kind of just described my PhD, which is really exciting to kind of hear. This is I think a really important thing within architecture, not this idea of what people call remedial acoustics. So, remedying problems that already exist from that come out of a kind of visualist design strategy, but really thinking of sound at the outset of design processes. And to bring our project, I guess, back to that broad framing. What happens when you think of sound from the outset? What happens when you think of sound as a provocation, not just for buildings, but for the entire assemblage of human, non-human actors, social dynamics, political dynamics, and everything that might give rise to architecture as well. We asked the question, what happens when you take that broad, I would say view, but now I'm using visual terminology again, it's difficult not to, but broad stance.
To close the circle, Alex, would you like to ask Julia, obviously two colleagues working together, but also two people coming together from quite different disciplinary backgrounds also?
Yeah, that I shall do that. I guess this is a nice connection. We're moving from this idea of thinking about a whole space or assemblage, and in the video you use this word patch to describe space, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit more about your thinking and ideas behind that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think we kind of talk about it as an open-ended assemblage of entangled ways of life, and I think the reason why this was kind of a useful underpinning concept for the project was that it allows us to kind of ask about communal effects without assuming what they are, and I think from the early days of kind of challenging what the high street might be and wanting to draw attention to kind of care or mutuality or other things that are happening side by side with financial transactions, we were kind of interested in trying to amplify that and to kind of listen with care to what's kind of happening and what's emerging from a particular site. I think the kind of term is an ecological one, so I think it kind of comes from this idea that there's a kind of mosaic of patches and they kind of overlap, and they kind of bring together kind of life worlds and life ways. I think somebody was mentioning the kind of concept of worlding, and this kind of question kind of emerges from that way of thinking about space, which is about how do we live together beyond just kind of human concerns and the social in the kind of narrow sense to a much broader one. And I think the way we've been using patch in relation to listening is this kind of idea of noticing. So this comes from Anna Singh's work, Mushroom at the End of the World, which I think we all kind of fell in love with a little bit. This kind of idea of kind of paying attention to as not being a kind of passive thing, but actually something that then takes part in the kind of becoming. So thinking about kind of notions of care, not as a kind of abstract concern which we're separate from, but something we're kind of actively taking part in. So I think patch is a kind of way of not only drawing in kind of the multi-species, but kind of thinking about space not just as this kind of bounded entity or this kind of extensive kind of thing, but thinking about kind of intensities, relationships, and a much more kind of ecological kind of way.
I don't know if it's in English at all, but the work of Vinciane Després, a French philosopher working on like she's written a book on bird territories and how they kind of navigated sonically, and very much like kind of challenging the idea that territory is just about kind of having access to like, you know, what you need and kind of guarding that territory, but actually it's kind of like the way that these patches essentially produce one another by existing next to one another, and how like sometimes play fighting at the kind of border of the territory is actually just about finding out about who's there, and all sorts of kind of complex things about how sound and bird song kind of like produce those territories. And it's a good one to look at as well. Can pass on.
That sounds amazing. I mean, I think kind of very much, you know, our finding out was driven by these processes of listening to the compositions together. And what was fantastic is when we were looking at kind of, for example, Food Hall, which is a kind of pay-as-you-feel kind of social space at setting up a national food service, there were all these kind of conversations which were very much about kind of economy and food and eating and these kind of social concerns, but they were brought together with the kind of the dripping of water or the revving of an engine. And so suddenly, as a kind of different way of thinking the political and the social, we could kind of bring those things in relation to one another, and we found that really interesting. So that sounds an incredible reference and really, really appropriate.
I'll pass it on. But Alex, like patch obviously in music means, or at least in kind of sound, means something quite different, I suppose. Depends what technologies you work with, I guess.
Yeah, we've been thinking about this a lot recently, and in relation to things like Jane Bennett's Vibrant Matter, and Brandon LaBelle writes about sonic agency too. But this idea that kind of, the physical idea of a patch is one thing, but what happens with the idea of vibratory propagation that carries across volumes, that resonates, that reflects, that echoes across distances and in different ways, and implicates. So I guess we're, you know, through this project also kind of unpacking this idea of what patch can be, you know, when physically when thinking through sound. The idea of listening as in some ways a radical act, the possibility to overhear, we're really interested by. What does overhearing do to transform to within public space, to expose us to diversity? to that which we're not necessarily prepared for, to that which might be difficult or different or challenging. But we're also interested in the possibility of overhearing as an act of, well, of listening as an act of care, listening as an act of giving attention to the other, and the possibility to use listening to pay attention to acts of mutuality, of exchange, of kindness, and so therefore to amplify the possibilities for public space to be thought of in this way. And yeah, going back to Anna's thing, she talks about the idea of smelling as an act of transformation. Smelling is to be already in touch with the other, to be transformed by the other. And I'm compelled by the notion of listening as something which might operate also along these lines. So yeah, sorry.
No, can I say so? No?
Yes.
Yeah. I was thinking that there is part of care, there also is this being ready to hear what you're not expected to, or being open for, and it's very interesting with sound, because I think there's a lot of, like, entering a room, there's a lot of associations with it that we don't think about, but when it mismatch, or when you can work with new associations, it can suddenly open up for new encounters, a new way of experiencing something. When I think of patch, also that you can kind of challenge new associations between things through sound.
I think also sound challenges ideas about proximity as well. Thinking about listening to sounds which you can't see, which are beyond from sources that you don't know, and I think that ties in with kind of patch as well, of not being this spatially defined red line, and actually being anything in the concept of listening, anything that you can hear, and being attentive to anything that you can hear. A kind of a whisper might be quite close, but actually a revving of a car engine might be quite loud. And so I think that it challenges, it's still spatial, but it challenges ideas of proximity that are really embedded within architectural representations and architectural processes.
It's funny
just
because
to jump in on the end of that, that's where I would come back to the word strategy, and I guess reoffer that this is the strategy that we're proposing through this tool. This tool is a way to engage with this kind of thing in microcosm, but really what we're interested in doing is nurturing these approaches to listening as strategies for the times that we find ourselves in, and the possibilities for transformation of space that they offer.
It's funny because when I watched your video and I heard the word patch, because I was kind of in quite a like sound mode, and like I immediately thought it was like a Max MSP patch, which is like this kind of music technology that basically you kind of design a little kind of system of switches and responses, and like then you kind of put a sound into it and it kind of transforms it in a certain way and it comes out. And it can, you can have all sorts of kind of responsive parameters set into it, so that like if it goes over a certain volume, it starts to do something else. Or that was at least my very basic usage of it in my music undergraduate. But quite like the idea as well of kind of like patches, like something you apply on top of a set of materials, and it kind of shifts and transforms the way they kind of as they pass through them, they're kind of transformed, which I suppose brings us back to rehabilitation in a kind of very like loose, roundabout way. Well, no, I think it's, to try and to recap our words, and to almost try and attempt a kind of little narrative that kind of built up as we went around them. We had kind of rehabilitation, talking about coming back to normal, and some of the kind of maybe disciplinary or kind of like perhaps conservative ideas that might be within that, and then actually kind of talking about supporting a transformation, and then that kind of comes to the high street and it's kind of its moment of crisis, and it becoming something, not just for consumption, but transforming towards something that's more about togetherness and immersion. And then the stage kind of as the focus for that togetherness, for the paying of attention, for kind of being visible to one another, the high street potentially as that stage, the idea of the stage also as the platform for one moment in an episode in a kind of ongoing process. There's rehearsal, there's kind of different versions, and you know, the performance is kind of never just a final thing. It's always kind of ongoing, but then also the question of whether the stage can really be an element within the city, or whether it's actually kind of resists the city and actually resists all of the kind of pragmatics and politics that kind of like discipline our togetherness and is something, a complete space of freedom. So then when we talk about strategies that come from music and sound, so ways of sonic doing, the degree to which the stage is a kind of experimental platform to then push those ways of doing and being and sounding together to a degree that they can't happen just within the street, and kind of so how the stage might pull the street in a different direction or kind of pull it towards something more radical. And then the street and a kind of set of street as patches and overhearing one another and kind of ideas of neighboring or kind of, yeah, this overlapping not just as a spatial thing, but as a sonic thing, the blurring of boundaries. And then somehow we got back to rehabilitation, but I've already forgotten by the end of that. So that's kind of collectively, I think, our offering as a kind of set of concepts: rehabilitation stage, rehabilitation high street, stage, strategies, and patch. Which I think are kind of, all of them sit between quite a lot of different problematics, disciplines. So yeah, I think there you go, New European Bauhaus. That's our project, that's our group project submitted. But that's also an opening to kind of, that's my like weaving together of it, but the floor is open to kind of thoughts of how this all comes together, what it all might mean.
And if our invisible audience would like to ask some questions or comment on things, please write your stuff into the chat. There's not so much in it so far. Erika, you wanted to say something, right?
Yes, no, it's I think it's interesting. I mean, all of us is working in creative fields, doing things that are very embodied and in a way should be sensed or experienced real life. And then it's interesting, this thing of how we then construct something different when we talk about it and finding these ways of talking about what we're doing. I think it's, for me, this is always also a challenge, this thing of having a strong experience or feeling of what you are doing, and then you should find these words of how to communicate it with people who haven't been part of it. Because this is what we do now. Like, we have all created our different projects, and then we discuss them without having really experienced them. It's interesting, and this thing of paying attention to which words you use or we use to communicate what we are doing.
That's really interesting. The idea that as well as moving words around, we also might move sounds or images or methodologies.
Mm.
Was there who has access to the questions? Can you see?
There's nothing in the chat so far. Sorry.
No, but we have, I guess most people are like on seeing via Future Architecture Rooms, so I don't know if there's so the floor is open to all of you instead.
I mean, I have a question. You folks, do you find this notion of an European Bauhaus appealing for your own practice? Would you like to be a part of it? I mean, is it an inspiring way to frame this kind of work on the future or whatever it is? Does it mean anything to you?
not so much. For me, it's very, I don't know so much what is in it. And when I have taken in kind of the visuals from it and parts of its presentation. And for me, I wonder about the relationship with the old Bauhaus, so to say, or for me, I don't, I mean, this is, when I see this, I've been a little confused about that, that connection. But I don't know so much, I must admit.
So please stop recording now, okay? I think obviously Bauhaus is very much about branding, and the new European Bauhaus, I mean, maybe if you've seen the logo, I think the logo is really kind of disturbing in its naivety and whatever it is. You know, these trees and the houses and a family, two parents and a kid and a dog. So if this is the future that we all should work on, maybe the new European Bauhaus may not become super relevant. But yeah, I think if we manage to learn something that is really maybe subversive or aggressive or wild from the Bauhaus, that's why we found this party or fest notion so interesting. Might be interesting, but to be honest, I think there is not much in it yet. It's about us as Europeans or creatives, whether we come up with some suggestions. I mean, it's rather a vessel for processes or ideas or so, and all of us could contribute. And future architecture probably will be one of the possible agents, platforms, frameworks for doing so. So I think this will be really connected. So it's a real concrete and easy chance to work on that together.
I think one of the things that's become really clear since COVID is the opportunity to join in kind of with different programs globally, really. And I've really enjoyed kind of joining friends and meeting people across that. And I think this kind of translocal kind of approach to working with partnerships, in particular local situations, is really great. And I was lucky enough to be part of a eco-nomadic school, which kind of brings people from local communities traveling together to go and kind of make something, but also kind of share their kind of practices and context with one another. And I find that really interesting. So if there's a kind of opportunity to kind of work in that way, it would be really exciting, I think.
Yeah, I like the idea of kind of whatever happens with New European Bauhaus, essentially kind of using it as a moment to reappraise what really is there to be learned from. And actually after we were speaking, Freo, and you were telling me, because I honestly didn't know that much about it. I'm not an architectural kind of, my music degree and then my kind of urban sociology, something or other, we didn't, in a way, there was almost a kind of anti-architecture, vibe within that. It was less about architecture as kind of, but anyway, that's another story. But essentially I didn't know an awful lot about how it went down and these parties, and I'm much more interested now. And the way we've been talking about our own activity, our own program this year within Future Architecture Platform, it had already come up, but then just earlier today, I was talking with my colleagues, Fanny Costuru and Elahe Karimia, who are working with me to organize the program for the year. And we were talking about parties as a kind of methodology for the kind of movement experiments that we want to stage through the year, responding to kind of different questions of kind of how power is enacted via the body, of rewilding and what that means, and then of topography and how that shapes mobility. But kind of thinking of, and it also came from a conversation with a choreographer that we're going to work with in Paris, where I kind of mentioned, I said like, well, we're interested in urban rewilding, and it's about bringing trees into the city. And he was like, is that how you're using the word wild in urbanism? Because that doesn't sound like what I think of as wildness. That sounds like a very polite park. So if you're interested in wildness, let's have a party with, let's kind of bring these non-human kind of beings together in a space, in a public space without permission, and kind of move and dance and have a party with them. And so I think the combination of that, and then it reconnecting with what you were saying about Bauhaus and the kind of party as a moment of leveling out and of kind of deconstructing of certain aspects of hierarchy, at least, or at least maybe the establishment of a different one, but at least a kind of moment where we all kind of move together, where communication changes and where, you know, you come out transformed in one way or another. Also, we've all been lacking them in the last year. So if nothing else, that's, I think, what we're going to take away from the Bauhaus as an inspiration for our program this year.
Maybe we could develop a form of collaboration without language. That would be a very interesting, making use of Bauhaus tradition, because it's all about doing something, being a body, moving together, singing, dancing, having sex, drinking. And I think it was not about words, not so much. And if at all, the words were very few and very short and sharp and provocative.
If I could just jump in here, I think there's something interesting coming out of all of this about methods, not disciplines, or practices, not disciplines. It was interesting hearing John talking about architecture adverse kind of way of being, and then thinking about the new European Bauhaus as a Brit and feeling slightly awkward about current political circumstances. I'm not going to mention a certain word. And relationality, transcultural issues as well. You know, this word high street, that something came up there that I found quite interesting about kind of vocabulary and culture. So from a personal point of view, and can think about this in my own work a lot, doing is great, because it kind of, you know, what we've been experiencing on this project is different approaches and ideas pouring in as we do, and the project growing richer and so on. We haven't been drawing lines between things, you know, and maybe one of the problems with this new European Bauhaus is that it's this monolith. But what's the monolith? There are some lines, right? But, you know, what's the practice? It's maybe the problem is that that's not defined yet.
This is also what I so much like about like the concept of care, that it's also is a doing, and it's a verb, and it's something about it holds a lot of knowledge in how to interact between people and how to act in the world, that it's not just a concept that is very kind of separated from, which I think sometimes in and especially in academia, and when certain concepts we use, they become so distant from what we are doing. But care is also something that really kind of brings to the core, like an action. Or
we sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I thought you had finished.
I'm finished.
No. There's a couple of questions that Sasha has sent through on the chat. I'm going to kind of summarize the first one a bit, but it's saying it's curious that this overhearing is happening here and now. Going back to the idea of overhearing, like this is kind of from someone who's obviously kind of tuned in like via the broadcast, I think. And like for you, I could be a passive listener. The platform allows me political agency with how I interact with your speech. How do you, essentially the question is, how do you perceive the invisible voices and agencies of your listeners right now, who of course you can't see, who are kind of overhearing us having our own conversation between ourselves to a certain extent?
And also the listeners of the website, now that it's live, I think is interesting to consider as well.
Who are kind of invisible within the space of the website itself.
Julia, do you want to talk about the way in which the website maps out a publication as a kind of trace? Because we did think about this, like once it goes live, there is this invisible audience, if you like, and we wanted to somehow think about how we might trace journeys through this site in space and time.
Yeah, I think we've been trying to, I think as a kind of practice of care, we've been trying to take things quite slowly and not to kind of leap ahead too much into instrumentalizing or tying down what might be possible or what might come from the project. But one of the things that we wanted to do is be aware of these different people who were coming and engaging with the website, I suppose. I'm not sure, I'll come back maybe a little bit to the question about overhearing us now, but the idea was that as you started to kind of gather these textual artifacts, they came together to kind of map in kind of time and space, a kind of unique journey through this kind of process of listening in terms of what you attended to, what you kind of paid attention to. So of course, we started to kind of make those decisions a little bit between us as a group, but then you kind of layer that onto it. And at the end, you go to the library and it kind of creates this kind of publication that's unique to you. And just there's something quite nice about all these different kinds of publications kind of going out into the world with different kind of people who've taken that journey, and we would have a record of that as well, but also to invite kind of people to feed back. And I guess the idea also, we were kind of discussing a little bit with some organizations or groups that might want to work with it, that could become a kind of exhibition. So each of the publications could be kind of a series of kind of maps of different journeys through that site that are kind of unique to or personal to those people that engage with it.
A note to say that the full publication facility isn't quite live on the website yet. There will be a kind of publish download option, but you'll see what we're talking about.
I mean, I just, yeah, whether talking about the acousmatic as well, Alex, maybe your best place to kind of discuss that as a kind of concept that's been important for us.
Yeah, another concept, another potential practice. Going back to the idea of the invisible, and that's something that's come back in here, these invisible listeners out there right now that we can only imagine. Quite interested in this book, Sonic Agency by Brandon and Dall, published in 2018, and there's a chapter in there about the possibility of productive listening in the context of the invisible, and the idea of taking sounds out of their context so as to listen to them in a different way. And this is what we kind of do here on the website. So we deliberately take the recorded sound out of its context, so as to kind of sever it, if you like, from the logic of appearance, of visual thought. And I guess we're asking the question, kind of, what happens to your listening when you don't have the visual cue to fall back on? What else might enter into your frame of awareness? How might your listening reach further potentially into what may be heard? And that kind of could potentially come into action. I mean, Monika picked up on the way that the voices seem so direct. I thought that was a really interesting point. For me, it's often also to do with this idea of the presence of the non-human, quite how much street sound there might be, dripping water, puddles, material processes. And I found it interesting how maybe in my day-to-day life, my practice listening, if you like, regulates that out so as to amplify those pieces of information which might more directly kind of be of informative concern to me. So interested in how we tip the scales here and kind of what that does. Yeah, John, were you going to say something?
I was going to kind of link it to the stage, but actually just in the last few minutes that we've got, because we're going through to quarter two, as we started a little late, there's two more questions that came in, and I kind of wanted to pose them in turn to Monika and to Erika, just so you also have a kind of a last word before we wrap up. Kind of connecting it all together as well. There was a question saying, in short, do people need to know that others are listening in order for everyone and everything involved to have agency? And I just thought, Monika, that is kind of interesting in terms of the idea of the stage, going back to questioning kind of what is the stage like, and the relationship between what's going on the stage and then who's watching, and kind of how the way that those watching affect what's going on the stage.
I think being aware that someone could be listening to you is very important, because it has to play a role in regulating what you have to say, because we don't have this ability to control how, well, we can try to control how our words sound and how they are interpreted, but we are aware of a very few of our listeners, and most of them are invisible. So to a certain extent, we have this responsibility to really manage what we're saying and how we're saying it. But at the same time, we providing these tools, we also have to allow everyone to be able to say what they have to say. So you don't necessarily need to know, I think, who the end recipient is, but you have to be aware that it does go out there and it can be perceived in different ways.
Yeah, it's hard to take care of and with an audience which is invisible. So it kind of brings a different set of challenges about who you're actually sitting talking to and how do you communicate with those people you can't see. And then there's a couple more coming in, but I'm gonna just ask the last question I can to Erika, which is, can we view the idea of interdependence as a new form of public practice or city making, which embraces collaborative care, improving the accessibility and approachability of spaces at the urban and domestic scale? I suppose, yeah, just as kind of interdependence and maybe just how you understand that even within your kind of project.
Yes, I think this is what it's the core about it, that we have to see ourselves in a mesh and in a relationship that is dependent upon each other. It's not about like one sole part or one entity, but about like the connection that it makes in between each other. So it's not about like thinking, and to simplify it within architecture, now there are many different practices, but a lot of the time it's been like a focus on either social processes or material processes, or the endpoint or the process. But I think that we have to kind of see the whole picture at once, like user, maker, material, and my special kind of, or what I've been specifically focused in, has been the process, and also to think about not just like as the maker, as like a person that participates. Like in some social processes, it's like we want to bring in people from different parts joining, but for me it's also been about like what happens with us when we participate, like how can we how is it possible to also think about what the different things that we do affects us and how we relate to our surroundings through how we do it. So it's not just about like different people are part of a process, but it's also about what happens with them in being part in this process, and how can this be part of like, forming our relationship to our surrounding.
I think it relates a lot to what Amica was talking about, the way that our projects shape us and shape our organizations as well.
And I mean, and everything influences on this, and it's, I mean, you can go too far in it, but I think it's also very interesting to start to pay attention to all these things that influence us while we are working and while we are doing things.
Well, we are basically at the end. Freo, did you want to say anything to wrap up at all?
I must say, after this talk, I'm a bit more hopeful regarding this initiative, because maybe either Future Architecture or whatever organization within this new European Bauhaus, might succeed in luring you into collaboration, and this would be exciting in any case. So I think Europe is something exciting because of its inhabitants, at least. And for me, it's not so much about Europe. Maybe it's rather interesting in a more international context, but I mean, we can start here, right? It's an interesting continent, and we live here anyhow. So thanks a lot. This has been really rewarding.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. And really looking forward to seeing everyone pop up through a year of Future Architecture platform things.
Thank you. And thanks to John.
Thanks all.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we're invited to stay here if you want, because I think they've gone over to
digital refreshments.
Yes, I think Majer is now on the stream, but I think we are in the main room the backstage room now. It's quite interesting actually how you seamlessly go from on stage to backstage without doing anything at the click of a button.
Now we're not live.
No, I don't think so.
Or?
Don't say anything incriminating just yet. No, I think it's, but this is where the the kind of hanging out with other people, digital refreshments will take place.
Hello. So this was the second day of the Creative Exchange 2021. I thank to all the fellows in the first, to all the moderators. Thank you for watching us today. Stay a little bit longer with us. I hope you prepared yourself some food and some wine. We planned to have some architectonic of a popcorn today. And we will have some fun with Iglu Theater, which is one of the few Slovenian professional theaters with an emphasis on improvisation. Join us tomorrow again at the same time when we will talk about building equality. First in the morning we will listen to Marie-Louise Richard, and then we will continue with the 3 sessions, with the feminist session, with the colonizer sessions, and with the new politics sessions. And we will finish this year's Creative Exchange with a session which will be moderated by me and James Taylor Foster, and we will look back over the 6 years of the future architecture. Thank you again, and have a pleasant afternoon.
and welcome everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Vít. Some of you we've already met this morning or maybe yesterday, but I'm coming in a different role. I'm coming as an improviser, as a performer, and we have a little show prepared for you. It's not as much prepared because it's a spontaneous show, but I hope you enjoy it. And maybe you've noticed we've had a little bit of recommendations during this countdown. If not, I'm gonna re-explain it before I introduce the two of my partners. And so if you want to have the best experience of this show, I would like you to hide non-video participants and go into gallery view. The way you do this is if you go in the top right corner on your screen, you will see, I think this is this way for you, you will see a button that says view. Click on it and click gallery view. And if you have a bunch of other participants there and you need to hide non-video participants, if you don't have this option in the right corner button, go into video settings, which is if you go down where it says start video or stop video, there's a tiny little arrow next to it. If you click on that and go into video settings, you will find an option hide non-video participants. And as soon as you do that, you will only see whoever has the camera on. So I'm kindly asking you to do so because you will have a better experience. If you don't know how to do any of this, you can also watch this show via YouTube or via the connection on the website, but you won't be able to comment on it. And we need your comments so much. That's the main thing. So please stick around and join us via chat. You can try it out by saying something nice right away. Like you can say, hello, I'm here, or something like that. And we'll be very happy to communicate with you. We're not gonna pull people on. Hi, Yush. I'm glad you're here. If anyone else wants to join this chat conversation in chat, it's open for you. Okay. So again, put your screen on a gallery view and hide non-video participants, and that's the way to take the best out of this. Okay, I'm gonna remove the spotlight so you will see my duo partners as well. I would like to introduce you, Yush and Peter.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
So again, if you see a bunch of screens, hide non-video participants. If you, the way you do that is to go lower left on your screen, click on video settings and choose hide non-video participants. If you only see me or just Peter right now, just go on the view on the top right corner and click to gallery. That's it. Okay, great. How are you guys?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
I haven't really explained what we're going to be doing. I was just giving instructions so far. So we are performers. We like to travel, or we used to travel around the world, doing shows that are spontaneous and need audiences engagement. And since March, we started doing this online. We have a channel where we do this, and we prepared something special for you, kind of architecture themed, or at least future architecture themed. I hope you will find some kind of connection here. Okay. Did I forget to say anything? Yush, Peter, you want to add something?
No, this was perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we're going to start with the first thing. We're going to tell you a story. Okay. Particularly, Yush, I challenge you to do something.
Okay.
You guys both know that MAO, Museum of Design and Architecture in Ljubljana, released a filter on Instagram that we really liked. It's a special filter. If you want to see it, it's usually it's all the exhibits that MAO has, so you can put it on your Instagram. Yush and Peter knows that it exists, so I would like you, Yush, to connect your phone to Zoom and try it out, because I challenge you to tell a story based on the objects that will be projected on your forehead. So whenever you see an object on your forehead, you need to use it in a story, okay? Right. And the extra challenge, just to start, I would like our audience to suggest a topic of this story. So we would like you to anything that comes to your mind. It can be a story about a rabbit, or it can be yesterday was raining, or whatever. Like, everything is okay. So just type in any kind of topic that you want to hear. Okay. I'm still waiting for the audience. Yush, you're going to set everything up. Peter, you can leave at the moment. Thank you so much, but we'll need you later. I will also disappear very soon as I get a topic of a story from someone. Hello, is anyone here? Please communicate with us.
Please.
Otherwise, we're going to be singing.
Yes.
So.
Don't make us sing.
Don't make us sing. Masks as topic. Great. Masks. Good. Thank you, Maria. The only person that's communicating with us. We hope more people to start communicating with us. Yush, as soon as you're ready, you have a topic of masks, and we would like you to use the Mao Instagram filter. That's it. We're going to see it very soon.
Can you see me?
That's you. We see your green screen as well. So I think we're ready.
Okay.
The topic, masks. And go.
Once upon a time, there was a boy named, his name was, he was from Ljubljana. It doesn't matter what his name was. And he worked in a bank. And in this bank, of course, he would encounter different people, old people, young people, people who would come in and say, hey, can you give me a full trash can of cash? And he was a very, very nice guy. So he would usually, pack these things as they were. But one day, some robbers came in with some masks. And they said, give to us, nama. It means, so there were two robbers. And nama in Slovenian means like give to us too. All the money that you have in the bank. The boy was very, very scared because he was alone in this bank. And these two guys had masks on their faces. He did not know who they were. And he was feeling like falling out of a giant Ljubljana skyscraper because of all this gravity that was in him and all the anxiety. And he told these guys, listen, there's a lot of money in this bank, but before you rob it, I would like you to take off your masks. So at least I know who you are. And they took their masks off and he saw them. He remembered that they were once in a magazine called Tribuna. Yes, they were very, very good people, actually. People who came to the bank to rob it because they wanted to give this money away to the poor. They were modern day Robin Hoods. And he actually gave them information and a little tour, a touristic tour around the bank. So he showed them, this is our safe, you can take the cash here, here is where the gold is. If you go to the first floor, maybe you will find some jewels. Maybe we have some jewels, maybe not. And the two robbers were very, very happy with him. They took all the money together, all the jewels, all the gold, and they said, when we will be on the radio, dear Dennis, that was his name, of course, I forgot, we will not forget to mention your name. And he said, yes, very, very good. I will probably not work in this bank anymore, but I'm glad that you guys will help and that you were so kind that you took off your mask. And since you are very, very young, maybe you will also have posters on the Day of the Youth all around the country. And they said their goodbyes, and Dennis came back to his counter all alone in the bank, and the last street light went off because it was already 4 o'clock in the morning. So he went home and to sleep, and he felt very, very good about his story.
Yay! Okay, thank you, Yush. That was quite a challenging task, but it looked to him. You did it. You did it.
I tried. Tried my best.
If you want to, people, thank you, Maria, for responding into the chat. We're slowly warming up. Everybody who just arrived or weren't sitting behind their computers before, you're watching an improvised show online. We're both in our homes, in our mini studios, doing a show for you that's kind of improvised, built especially for you. If you don't know how to watch it, click on gallery view on the top right corner. It will make it easier and also hide non-video participants. Okay, great. And also we need you to write your ideas, suggestions in chat. And also you can applaud like Maria did. We like that as well, even if we don't perform in a theater. Okay, who wants to take it away?
Yes, I have a challenge for Peter. Okay.
Okay.
So, Peter, I want you to hold a press conference, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to be a PR person. You're going to be helping as a PR person of somebody very, very famous. Who this famous person is going to be up to our audience. So you can already start thinking about who this person might be. But Peter, as I said, you will not know the suggestions in advance. So I will ask you to turn off your speakers, and you will come to this press conference as the PR person of a famous person who built something that is architecturally very, very wrong, okay? So I don't know, maybe they build an igloo in the middle of the Sahara, okay? And these two ideas you will try to figure out, because me and Vida are going to be journalists and we're going to ask you questions. But of course, you didn't get the briefing, you don't know what's going on, so you will try to guess, okay?
But this is the scandal of the press conference.
This is a scandal, yes, it was a big, big scandal. This famous person wanted to build something in the middle of somewhere where this should not be built, and you will try to, of course, apologize to this famous person. But these two things you have to guess, okay?
Cool.
So turn off your speakers, maybe turn around and we'll call you or give you a message when we're ready, okay? So you don't see the comments. Okay, so everybody who is here in the chat, we would like you to write two things. First, we need one famous person. It can be whoever. I think Peter reads, you know, all these paparazzi magazines and also watches TV, so he knows pretty much any famous person. He's also a philosopher, so maybe he will know that. So one famous person from you guys. Don't be shy. Nothing will be wrong. So you can write it down. But we need your help. We cannot do the show if you're not giving us suggestions, for sure. So one famous person. Charlie Chaplin. Okay, that's pretty good. Maybe we have one more, so we have a little bit of a democracy. Maybe somebody else wants to write.
Maria is the only one commenting at the moment.
Yeah,
so thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. The other people can also write in if you want to. Otherwise, we're going to take Charlie Chaplin. Okay. Charlie Chaplin, Pamela Anderson. Okay. Pamela Anderson. That is they are very, very far apart. Okay, I'm going to take Pamela Anderson, so it's not Maria's suggestions all the time. What did Pamela Anderson build? What sort of a building? It can be a house, it can be an office building. What sort of a building did she build? Well, she didn't build it on her own, but she did build it, and it's very scandalous because it's not the right building for that environment. We're going to need your help with this because we don't know a lot of buildings. An exhibition, okay, that's a good one. What kind of an exhibition? Maybe it's a special exhibition or something. What is this exhibition all about?
Trump Tower.
She did the Trump Tower, yeah. Okay, that's a good suggestion. Maybe we'll wait a couple of seconds more if we have another suggestion. Otherwise, maybe we'll take Trump Tower. Maria likes the Trump Tower. Okay, let's say the Trump Tower. Why not? Okay.
So she built the Trump Tower.
I mean, I guess she built, let's say she built another Trump Tower because there's one already. Maybe you guys can write where she built it. That would be good. So it's not
like a city, anywhere in the world.
A city. Not New York, where the Trump Tower is already, but anywhere else in the world. Where did she build this Trump Tower? Any city that you wish. Please write it down in the chat so we can start this game. Zgornja Kungota, Slovenia. Okay,
very good.
That's very good. Zgornja Kungota is a very, very small village here in Slovenia. It has a little bit of a funny name, so people like to do it. Okay, so Peter is the PR person of Pamela Anderson. She built a Trump Tower in Zgornja Kungota, Slovenia. Of course, it's not a building that would be fitting for Zgornja Kungota. So Peter will try to guess these things and we will be journalists. Are you calling Peter or am I calling Peter?
I'm going to call him.
Okay. So he turns around and didn't hear us, hopefully. Peter, did you hear us? Also, you cannot look at the comments. Peter, I'm on fire, Peter. Okay. Oh no, he heard me. He's calling. Okay.
Great.
Let this press conference begin.
Hello. Okay. So thank you for all of you joining me here. I assure you this is nothing too scandalous or damaging. So let's just proceed with the questions. It's going to be okay.
Yes. I have a question.
Yes. You in the black hat.
Sorry?
Yes, you in the black hat.
Yes, I'm a journalist. So my question is, I am from this. Oh, my camera is doing something funny. Okay. So I am from this. It's called. We are a watch magazine.
Yes.
Baywatch magazine, because we watch Bays. Okay. And Bays. Baywatch. Yes.
Yes.
Baywatch magazine. Because we watch. You know what the Bay is. You know.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So we watch these a lot, and we would like to ask this person that built this thing. She has not been around a lot, but why is she coming back with a project like this?
Well, she wanted to make her great comeback. You know, she has been a bikini icon in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And she thinks that a lot of media and people have forgotten about her. So she wanted to make her mark on the architectural world and to make her comeback.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, it's Roger here. I'm from New York Times. I would just like to say that the whole city is quite upset. A building that's quite significant for our city was practically copied in a small country that no one ever heard about. What should we report on here? Like, what do you have to say? Why could something like that happen?
Yes. Well, as we know, a lot of the Balkan countries have had their influences from the Western world. So a lot of the architecture was copied from like France. So they had bridges. So also Ljubljana had to have.
We're talking about tall skyscrapers here. So it's not just, it's not a small thing. It's something that doesn't even belong in a small town in the middle of Steierska region.
Yes. Well, a lot of towns like Maribor have been wanting to expand their.
Yeah, Maribor is at least like a town, but we're talking about villages here, and it's a huge building. It's huge. It's a huge building.
Very bigly. It's bigly. Very bigly.
Yes. It's a huge building in Steierska, and Pamela was very happy to lead that project, and she knows she's not an architectural manager. She knows that, and she's made this public apology before. Yes.
But did she ask the guy who bears the name of this building to cooperate, or is this standalone?
Which one? You mean Tush?
No. Well, she actually she did something. She said something on Twitter, but he doesn't get it anymore. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to work with these projects with the admission and the blessings of the local politicians and businessmen. So we approached every one of them. We approached Mura, we approached
but we're talking about the building that you copied or Pamela copied. It's like we're talking about the owner of the building, or not the owner, the guy whose name is on the building.
Yeah, one of the buildings we copied inspiration from was one of them was the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, but this is a huge building.
Yeah. One of them was the World Trade Center.
Whatever. It's not there anymore.
I heard that this building has actually a lot less floors than it was, because the guy lies a little bit about how many floors he has. He also says that he has big hands, but I don't think so.
Yes. So the White House was.
I have a feeling I'm talking to an idiot right now. I'm journalist, but this is just too much. I think I'm gonna.
We have several projects. I'm just talking about the whole range of influences we have.
You're talking about this big skyscraper with the guy's name on it.
Oh, you mean the tower of the Trump?
Yes.
The tower of the Trump is what they call it. That's why the tourists come to New York.
The Tower of the Trump, please.
Well, it's a delicate news piece, so I can't just, divulge information like that. You'll forgive me, I'm sure.
Okay, that's all good, but why this small village
very,
in
very small.
Steyerska region? It's like
You want to ask me why Pamela Anderson replicated the Tower of the Trump in Steyerska? Is that what you're asking me?
well,
Very specific village in Steyr.
yeah. It's not a lower, it's not a middle one, it's the upper one, you know.
Yeah. Well, we had plans in Spodnja Kungota as well, but we only concentrate on the northern part. Yes, on the northern Kungota. Yeah.
It's not the northern.
Yes. Well, some people say it's even northwest. Yeah.
I mean, it's not the northern. It's not the lower one. It's the other one. Yes.
Yes. It's the higher one.
You're not gonna say the name of the village, right?
You mean the Spodnja Kungota?
No, the other one.
Yeah. We had plans also in Zgornja. Yes.
Okay.
Kungota, yeah.
Thank you very much.
That is all that I needed. Thank you very much.
And
back to Baywatch.
They'll be happy to have Pamela Anderson as their ambassador, and she'll be a great representation for Slovenia, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you very much. I gotta go report on something serious. Bye.
What?
Bye.
Oh my God, they were on me so much. Okay, I hope they don't find out.
All right, thank you very much, Peter. Oh, okay, I think you got everything great.
Oh my God.
How would you call the Tower of Trump for real?
No, the Trump Tower. That was me just making a joke.
Yes. Okay, we have some comments. They said, bravo. So yeah, you did. It was really, it's Zgornja Kungota, Trump Tower, and of course, Pamela Anderson built it.
Yeah, when it was like a really village in Steyerska, I was like, oh no, guys, this will take 4 hours.
What? But it was amazing. It was the first one. Very, very good. All right. Peter, do you maybe have a challenge for us, for me and Vid now, since you were the one sweating in this game?
Yes, we would like to play a scene which will deal with narrative and space. We want to see how a certain story or a narrative emerges from a specific type of location.
You guys had a debate earlier, I think, on this topic. That's why we took it, but we're not architects, so we only took the topic out of it. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah. So we'll try to take the topic of narrative, of space and film, and see how different locations influence different stories. So Yush and Vid will play a scene, and each of them will be calling or playing the scene from their own different locations. So we'll need 2 locations, okay? So they can adjust their virtual backgrounds. We need 1 location for Vid and the other location from Yush.
Is it a geographical, non-geographical? What kind of a location are we looking for?
We're searching mainly for non-geographical locations. So you don't have to say city or a country. You can say a shed or a hospital, whatever. That's not a city or a country specifically. So we need 2 locations.
Please write it down in chat.
Yes. And while some of you are thinking about the locations, you can also, we'll talk about it later. We'll talk about that later. But maybe while we're waiting for locations, we have one. Bathroom, thank you, Sasha. Hotel room, hairdresser. Okay, these are great, guys. These are great. Okay, so cool. Let's say, Vid, you'll be at a hairdresser.
Okay.
You'll be at a hairdresser, and we'll see how that location influences his story. And Yush,
yes,
you will be in a airport. Yes. So thank you for these suggestions. While they get ready and change, I would also like to ask if Nina Bachun is present with us today.
No, she's not. I think she left.
Okay. So I'll just ask anyone then, or anyone can type in the chat. We'd also need 2 or 1 movie genre, because not only will they play a story from this location, Yes, they'll also great. You guys are great with movie genres. I see they're already dropping in. Okay, so we have a nice few movie genres, and I'll switch the genres between them. Great. I won't read them out loud, so they can be a surprise for Vid and Yush. Great. So I'll just ask to see how are they doing? How's it going for you guys? Ready. Okay, Yush?
1 second.
Yes. So we have Vid, who's at the hairdresser, and Yush, who's at the airport. We'll see what's their relationship. And we'll start as a normal scene, and then we're gonna change genres, okay? And let's see how it develops. So the first scene, cool. The first scene is gonna be neutral, guys. So whenever you're ready, action. And then I'll switch genres.
Yeah, I'm coming, yeah.
Hey, man.
Oh, hey.
Hello.
Oh, you're on your way.
Yeah, I'm flying back.
Okay. So you're coming home, actually.
Yes, going back home. Coming back home.
Did you tell mom and dad that you're coming?
No, not yet. It's a little bit of a surprise.
Oh, they're gonna be so excited. Our little brother coming home.
My favorite brother.
So how was I don't know how you call it, the thing you study, you know, I'm not an educated person, but
it's called architecture.
Yeah. So how is archaeology?
No, it's great. How's hairdressing, Bobby?
Well, it's great. We're a bit of a lockdown, so I can only take one person per hour, so I have a lot of free time, but I'm just not doing anything at the moment. It's dark here, you know, the time difference is it's actually 3 a.m. I'm just
why are you
I'm alone
why are
here.
you calling me then?
Great, guys. Great going so far. We're gonna switch the genre to horror.
The thing is, I think I heard something in my salon. I think it's in the closet, but then I opened the closet and it's empty. So I thought maybe you could just calm me down and tell me, I remember when we were kids and you always heard things, but then there was nothing. But then I found blood also.
What? Man, you're just spooked like always.
No,
you know?
there's literally blood.
What? What's wrong?
Josh?
Yeah, I'm here.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. Come on, listen, you got to calm down. I mean, you've been doing this since you were 10. Like, there's no such thing as ghosts, you know. You can't.
I see you. You're what?
What are you talking about?
Are you even real?
Great job, guys. We're gonna switch it up to a soap opera drama, like a telenovela.
I can't take any more of this, Bobby. You're too afraid. You should also leave town, not be with Mama and Papa anymore. They're just holding you back. You could have been a hairdresser of some famous people, but you stayed back because you're afraid of some little ghosts.
My life became a horror movie when I heard you're coming home.
What?
You're only coming home because our father is sick and you want to take everything from me. I was the one that stayed at home. I was the one taking care of our parents, and now suddenly you decide to come home.
I did.
You disgust me.
I want to see what's in that obituary. I want to see what Dad writes down. I want to see what's in the agreement and what I'm going to get when he is gone. Sorry, Bobby, but I'm taking your hairdressing salon. Please let me finish for once. I'm going to take your hairdressing salon and I'm going to put people in that don't know how to hairdress, and they're going to work for nothing, and we're going to put you out of business, Bobby. Because
Great job, guys. We're gonna end it with the last scene. Switch to romantic comedy.
Oh, so
because I'm in love with your wife.
My wife?
Yeah, I love Sandra.
Jessica?
Sandra Jessica, that's what we call her. Yes.
Sandra Jessica, yeah, that's her name.
That's her full name, double name, yes.
What?
Yeah, it's a thing. It's
well,
you know, when at your wedding, we kissed a little bit because we bumped into each other. It was nothing serious, but I fell in love right then and there.
Does she love you back?
I think so. She didn't until I told her that I have a bachelor's in architecture.
Sandra, come here. Sandra.
That's gonna get you all
Sandra.
the ladies.
Sandra,
And scene. Well, at the end, things got out of hand and secrets were being exposed. So it was a thrilling end. Thank you, Yush and Vid, for this dramatic reenactment. Thank you so much. Hey,
hello.
Thank you guys for your suggestions. They were great. I also wanted to do Japanese anime, but I said let's not put too much pressure on these guys.
I don't know much about anime, so.
But yeah, we just saw how the narrative was influenced by the space and location. So great.
Thank you very much, Peter. I have another challenge for you too. Thank you, Natasha, for writing bravo in the chat section. We are going to use the topic of two houses. When I was scrolling through all the topics that are being discussed here, I really liked the idea, and that's why we thought, let's take it out for a show. Again, we're not exploring the topic the way you are discussing it. We're just taking the title and try to understand it our own ways. So we're gonna need two houses somewhere around the world. So we're gonna need, for example, a house in a mid-class house in Japan and a rich person in Bulgaria, for example. So you can give an example of two houses, and Yush and Peter will come from these two countries, and you'll come from these two homes, and we'll see why you call each other. Okay?
Okay.
You're just like two characters that will be inspired by these two different houses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So whatever comes to your mind, yeah, you guys can also leave and get ready or stay here. So I would kindly ask you, dear audience, to write down two different locations or two types of home in different locations. It can be anywhere in Europe or all around the world. People in Yush will try to form a character out of the location and the place where they're staying. So I gave an example of a house in Japan, or it can be a castle in England, or I don't know, a Russian country house, dacha. Thank you very much. Russian country house, dacha. Yush, would you like to be Russian, or Peter, who's?
Yush, would you like to be Russian?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Yush, you are in a Russian country house, dacha. Let's get another place for Peter. Let's see what we have to say. Maybe not something Slovenian, or maybe let's have Peter is. I really like his accent, so you can really explore that. Cubicle in Japan. Cubicle in Japan. Peter, are you okay with that?
I'm okay with it as long as everyone else is okay with it.
Yes. Capsule hotel. Do you know what a capsule hotel is?
Yes.
Okay, great. So you're in a capsule hotel, or you're in a capsule hotel in Japan, and Yush, you are in a Russian country house and you guys need to develop some kind of a relationship. So you're two characters. Let's say you are on an online date or something. Okay.
Yes.
Or maybe you're business partners. We'll see what happens. So that's open to you. Define whatever you want. Okay. So as soon as you guys are ready, just let me know. If you maybe left your screen and came back later, I'm just going to quickly re-explain what's happening. We're playing a scene inspired by one of the topics at the panel discussions. At the moment, we're doing two houses. So we're taking two houses at two different places in the world. We're taking Mountain Cabin, Austria. I really like that one as well. Trailer Park. We got a lot. We took Russian Country House and a capsule in Japan. Peter, if you want to switch to Mountain Cabin of Austria, you can do that as well. Would you like to switch?
Sure.
Okay, let's put you in Austria just because it's gonna, yeah, Mountain Cabin. I don't think you'll find like a perfect capsule Japan thing, and but you'll find mountains. Okay, Yush, are you ready to start?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe you can start and define why you're calling Peter to Mountain Cabin in Austria. Okay,
sure.
And we're gonna start the scene in 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, let me see if this works. Yes, I would like to talk to Mr. Schutzinger about our President Putin coming to ski to Austria, but very incognito, so nobody knows.
Ja, okay, ja.
Calling.
Bitte. Hello, okay, hallo, wie geht's? Hallo.
Hello.
Ja. Hallo.
Also,
ja, excuse me, sorry.
Hello, Mr. Scherzinger. Do you hear me well?
Yes, hello, Mr. Secretary or assistant, I should say, no?
Assistant to the assistant of the assistant of a secretary.
Oh, yeah, it's so like multi-layered hierarchical world, Russia, yes?
Yes, we have very, very good hierarchy. That's why we are best top nation in the world, okay?
Yeah,
we have snow in Austria, yes?
Yeah, a lot of snow, a lot of good for health. It's good for health, you know. It brings out the viruses, yes, you know, the cold.
Yes. I thought you were maybe going to be more businessman. You are very casual.
You know, this is my morning jog out routine. We go in the morning, you know, to a little jog, you know, without the long sleeves. It helps us, our immune system, you know. So we'll have a similar regimen for Putin when he comes. We have a great thermal and regiment, yes.
I will write this down. He likes to go swimming outside very well. He also likes to fight bears. You have bears in Austria, yes?
No, there's not a lot of bears, but we can get bears. I have connections to like rings of fighting bears. Yes. We have underground rings of fighting bears, you know.
He will fight bears, okay?
Yes.
So our president will fight bears, and also he would like to ski with deer. You have any deer?
Well, they're hard to come by and to capture, but we'll put our men so they can capture deer. At least we'll have to, you know, make arrangements with the local park rangers and the police so they don't, you know, we'll have to bribe them, you know, so have maybe money.
You bribe people in Austria. I thought Austria was very country of, you know, discipline, you know.
Yeah, that's why it is. Yeah, that's why it is illegal, you know, to just capture deer, you know. Yes, you can't just capture deer.
Illegal also in Russia, but
yes, but if your president wants to ski with them,
yes,
yeah, we have to do that. No, we have to capture them illegally.
Understand? I write all this down. Okay, so yes, deer maybe you have to bribe. It's weird for us, but okay. You very kind for Austrian, huh? Austrian sometimes you are very, you know, posh. You have Mozart and so on. We have Tchaikovsky, so you know.
Yeah. Austrians are very cold. They don't like people. They want, you know, have peace in their basement.
Oh, would you like to be spy maybe?
Yeah, spy to lurk around people, pretend I'm someone different. Oh, hello, I am Ukraine. Like
no, you would be the same, like you, but you would report to us.
Oh, okay. And what do you want to report? Like, I'm just alone here in the mountains with my cabin. Yeah. I
don't know. Somebody important comes from European Union. We would like to know. You know.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, my place is a lot of. It's a hot spot for personal business political meetings.
Well, good. I will write this down. You are a spy now. Yes, so we will give you rubles.
Okay, that's great. I have to tell my wife.
No, don't tell anyone. It's between us, spy.
It's so exciting for me, you know. I just can't keep secrets. I have to tell someone.
Okay. So I have a scratch spy. You are not a spy anymore. Okay. Okay, we will come maybe tomorrow with a private airplane. The code is vodka man. Okay, this is vodka man Putin. He does not drink, but we call him like this, you know, because he's Russian. Okay.
Vodka man.
Vodka man.
Vodka Man, yeah. It's like superhero, no?
Yes, like superhero. Yes, a nice cottage, very nice in the back. I see you are like your cottage, a little bit lonely, a little bit.
Yeah. My grandfather built it when he came running back from the Russian war. Oh, we love Russia. It's okay. It was just so cold and dangerous.
I know. I have a Dutch of Mr. Chekhov. The writer. You don't know.
Okay, let's finish this conversation. So we had an Austrian and a Russian, and this is what came out. Thank you so much for your suggestions. I think we're slowly moving towards the end of the show. It's 6:45, and I think we are slowly finishing up. Yush and Peter are gonna undress or dress back or whatever. Oh, that was quick. Nice haircut, Yush.
Thank you. My camera.
Peter is still in the mountains.
Hello.
Okay, so everyone who sticked around with us, thank you so much for being here. And I would like to invite you as well to join me tomorrow at 12:30. We had a lot of fun, I think, in the first day, and also today and tomorrow again. We're gonna see each other just before the official program starts to do a little bit of a warm-up, and that's all I have to say. I think today's program is ending with us, so thank you again for being around. I hope you enjoyed this last part. Performing for you today was Iglu Theater. This is Yush, and that is Peter, and my name is Vid. Thank you also for thank you comments in chat. And have a beautiful evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.